check.
This is like when you think about the Rogan situation, like all the stuff that goes into like all of this, it's just very, I don't know, it's very foreign to me. Cheers. Hey,
Cheers.
Welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me.
Episode 5 maybe, yeah, or 4. So,
Single digits.
I know.
That's
early
adopter.
Exactly. Well, and that's, I feel like, I mean, we were kind of talking about this. It's just very, to get someone on a podcast, it's like intimidating because even yesterday, like talking to people, they're like, well, what are you going to talk to Henry about? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, it's not, I don't have a plan coming into a podcast, especially with someone you know or like a friend. It's like very, just see where the day takes you type of thing.
Yeah, informal. And we've been talking about doing it for so long.
I know.
That it's kind of fun to actually be sitting here with you.
And welcome to the house.
Space. Yeah, dude, this is awesome.
Basement. I should change right now. I call it the Matt Lena podcast, but it's very, I don't know if I should change it like Basement Dwellers podcast or.
Basement Dwellers.
Because, so this coffee table, I like drilled out holes to try to, and like took a wood chisel to try to get these mics to be able to.
I noticed.
Yeah, it's very,
yeah.
It's like super janky. I mean, but also, and this is kind of the thing, like I would never anticipate a podcast to like go big. And I don't know if you feel this way about creative things, but to me, like when I quit my job to move abroad and was doing just like trying to figure out video and photo, I never anticipated, like I was never like, I'm going to be, Peter McKinnon or like whoever, like insert big YouTube person here. Like it was never for me.
That's not why you're doing it.
Exactly. Which, and even this, it's like, that's not the goal of sitting down with someone and talking to them. Like, I'm not like, man, I hope tons of people listen to this.
Yeah, me either. It's more, I hear what you're saying. You're just doing it because you kind of are interested in the topic and you're like, oh, I'm going to pursue this.
Yeah.
I'm going to pursue going abroad and like trying to make video work. How long were you abroad for?
It was like, first off, Henry, I have known you for probably, I don't know, 5 years, 4 years?
Yeah.
Like since 2017, 18 or something like that?
Yeah.
But I literally have no idea how to pronounce your last name.
Oh.
Is it Hale?
Halle.
Halle.
Yeah.
Okay. What is that?
French Canadian.
Are you French Canadian?
Yeah.
Are you dual citizen?
Yeah.
Do you speak French?
Un petit peu. No,
Oh.
I don't really speak French.
Dang, I didn't know that. I was going to ask, I was like, I'm trying to think of the first time that I met you. Like, because in how I became I was like fascinated by you. Because I remember you had that red dragon when we went over to your house. I think it was the house when it was you, Andy.
And Dylan.
Yeah, we're all living together. And I remember, I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, I knew like 10 things about cameras. And I'm like, that's a red. Like, this is so insane.
Yeah, I think that was right before you went abroad. I remember that well. And you came over with your homie from
Drew.
Nebraska, Drew.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was, I don't know how long we met before that or if that was the first time we met.
That was the first time we met.
Okay.
Because Griffin had told me, like, oh, I got this friend Matt who does camera stuff. You guys should connect. I'm like, oh, for sure. Like, and then you came over and we chatted gear and
Nerded out for
for a couple hours, and then next thing I saw was you abroad. I think like that was pretty shortly, and then we didn't run into each other again for
a hot. I mean, I was gone
2
for
years.
a hot minute.
Yeah.
That's so. Before I jump into my video path, like, how did you get into video? I mean, is that?
Yeah. Well, real quick, also, it's funny that you asked how to pronounce my last name because I, until last weekend, didn't know how to pronounce my last name. I was like, oh, it's Matt, like just pronouncing it phonetically.
Yeah.
Matt Lena. Like, that doesn't sound right. How do you say it?
Lena.
Okay.
Yeah. It's very, it's like so, we were Polish and like coming over, I think we were skis, like Lanowski or Lanowski. And then when we got here, I think they were like, chop the ski off. Now you're American.
Lena.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not, I don't know if, I'm like, they should have just chopped the GH off too. Because if it was Lena, I feel like it would be easier for someone to pronounce.
Us Americans.
Yeah. Well, you're out here dual citizen,
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, it's actually coming in handy. My American passport is like totally expired by a couple of years. I've just been traveling on my Canadian one.
What do you? Is it?
And,
Go ahead. Sorry.
oh no, you can ask a question. Go ahead.
Is it easier? And this is something I found when I lived abroad was Brits, Canadians, and Americans typically have the best passport from a standpoint of like intercontinental travel, of like most ease of getting into a country, like from a visa on arrival, from a whatever it might be. Like it's very
Yeah,
the
I've heard the same thing.
and that's so. Have you had any issues coming into a country with a Canadian passport?
No.
Do people like question you at all? Like
No.
looking at like, are you really Canadian? Like,
No, they're like, oh, it's an official document. Here's the stamp. Like, we'll let you in.
yeah.
And then coming back in, I use my American passport.
Speed it up a little.
Yeah, and apparently, I tried to use my Canadian passport the first time. I gave them both because I didn't really know. Because I'm like, oh, this one's expired, but I've been traveling on my Canadian. I left on my Canadian passport. I'm coming back. Like maybe they need to put it in the system. And the customs guy was like, don't ever use your Canadian passport to get back into America because you're a citizen and like a resident in America.
Yeah.
Otherwise, your passport will get pinged for like a visa, basically like an automatic, like, oh, this guy's entering the country as a Canadian, and now he has 90 days or whatever it is to be in America before like something's flagged and he has to go back to Canada. So they'll just accept like an expired American passport.
Huh. That's, I mean, great security.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
If you have dual citizenship and two passports, now you know the very obscure case.
well, and that's I mean, not to bring controversial topics up right away, but why not? I'm a big proponent of like there has to be some security within the realms of like a border entry situation. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you go to any country. It's like even if you're American, you go to Europe. It's like if you're in the Schengen zone, I think you have 90 days, and it's like throughout these countries you can spend 90 days, but then you have to leave. Otherwise, it's like you get penalized, or I don't know. But most countries have some type of like system in place that's like, hey, you can't just show up and start like using all our stuff. And I don't know the right answer, but like, and I know it's a super controversial topic from the standpoint of like immigration and immigration law, and I'm an idiot, so I would not listen to me. But from the standpoint of, I think there has to be something
Totally.
of like, you can't just let everyone in.
Yeah, because
Like-
you need to have accountability on some level, It's like,
Exactly.
I would love to let everybody in, but then what about people who just want to abuse the system and not work?
Exactly.
Or, like, not contribute to society, I guess.
Which, and I've heard that the process of getting all of that type of stuff is fairly difficult, and I'm very like, thankful to be an American citizen. But it's also like you have to have something. Like again, you can't let everyone in. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, I don't really know enough about it. I've kind of tuned out the whole border thing.
that's. Do you? This is my personal stance. I feel like there's so many things going on in life, and so much that, like, we have that I'm like, there's things that I'm just like, hey, that's not me. Like, I'm not the guy to like sit here and like make a judgment of X, Y, and Z, because I'm like, I just don't. I mean, I don't have the bandwidth. It does to me. It's like there are people that are super interested in foreign policy and like border stuff. I'm like, hey, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because I'm not into that.
Yeah, and like it's nice to follow those types of people on like Twitter, I guess. Then you get some snippet of like, oh, this guy's an independent journalist or like has some authority in the space, so I can like gather some sort of information to formulate an opinion if an opinion's needed.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm in the same boat. It's like, shit, man. Like I don't have any influence in what happens at the border.
Yeah.
And like, I just try and do the best I can, and like the only thing I can influence or have control over is like me and my immediate surroundings.
Yeah.
And like the people around me. So it's like that's kind of what I try and focus on, is just like trying to be the best person I can be, live within the moral system that I've set, and then if it needs to be applied to a broader situation, like learn about it first and try and formulate an opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, I don't know. There's so much happening in the world. Like, you can't know about everything. And then you can't influence anything beyond ourselves. And, like, beyond shouting on the internet, which, in my view, isn't productive.
And that's, I mean, to come back to podcasting, like why I think this is so awesome. And this, I mean, I'm a huge podcast fan. I mean, I listen to probably, I think I do the math every year, and it's like almost a month or like a month and a half of total listening time, like 24 hours in a day. Like, I am always listening to podcasts, but it's because I think that it's like the truest form of communication, in that like texting or whatever it might be. It's a horrible medium, and this is the problem, that I think we have this filter that we can place between us and another person, where like even if I were to meet someone who has like completely differing views, or like thinks I'm an idiot, or whatever it might be, it's like the conversation in person, more than likely we're probably going to find some common ground that ultimately it's going to be like, hey, we disagree on this, but like everything else, we maybe have a similar interest, or like have a favorite type of thing. But I think with Twitter and Instagram and all this stuff, we eliminate that ability to have someone, it's just like, oh, you're this, like,
Yeah.
and
Just kind of broadly label somebody.
And then you feel good, and there's no like ramifications. And I use this as an extreme example, but like some of the things that people say to other people on Twitter, I'm like, will get them punched in the face, but they wouldn't say that to the person if they were standing in front of them.
Yeah.
And it's like, if everyone just acted like you were sitting across from someone and talking to them for 3 hours, and I think that's another thing that I think is really cool about podcasts, is like, they're a short podcast, but what I like to listen to is really long form, because it's like you can't fake 2 hours, 3 hours. Yeah. Like at some point, like the true you or the true opinion is going to come out.
Yeah. And
ultimately, more than likely, you're going to find something in common with that person. So, and I think there's a quote, and I love, he went on the Rogan podcast. He's a jazz musician who is a black man and plays in these clubs in like the South where the KKK is like still prevalent, and he converts KKK leaders, and I can't think of his name.
Well, that's a crazy story.
Why? And it all started, he was at a show and he was playing like on the stage, finishes, goes to the bar to like get a drink or a water or whatever, and sits down next to this guy who's like a super dragon, or I don't know what they're called, like I think dragon something in there, but like the highest thing within a KKK like group. And he was like very racist. He's like, I'm not supposed to like people like you because of like who I am. And he's like, well, who are you? He's like, well, I'm a grandmaster dragon, whatever. And he was like, oh, and they kind of started talking back and forth, and like ended up, talking for a long time. And what came from the conversation was, one of the things he had said was, how can you hate me if you don't know me?
Yeah.
And I was like, that is literally what we live in today.
Yeah.
Where people just like have this ability to be, it's so easy to cast judgment or like pass through this filter to say, oh, like you did this thing, like you didn't change this, or you posted a picture with that. It's like, you're a terrible person.
Yeah. Yeah. You use one specific example to label somebody as other.
Yeah.
And then once you other them, then it's really easy to just hate them because of what the other represents, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, you don't get to know anybody anymore unless you have a conversation with them. And then when you do have a conversation, you're like, wow, okay, maybe there is common ground. And I don't know, do you think it's the internet that creates these barriers where people just don't want to meet each other, or like meet each other in the middle, or want to understand their fellow human being? They're just like, well, I believe in a certain ideology, and if anybody strays away from that ideology or makes me uncomfortable, then it's their fault that they're making me uncomfortable, and therefore I hate them. Like,
I think the internet has made our ability to communicate worse, from the standpoint of like, even I'm a big believer in writing and reading, because ultimately speech is the way you articulate your thoughts and your ability to communicate with others. But now that we're almost interacting so heavily digitally, I feel like it's dampened that aspect, from the standpoint of people's ability to sit down and like have eye contact with someone and say tough things like, hey, you know, in a relationship, like, hey, this isn't working out, or like with your employee, or, you know, your boss comes to you like, hey, we need this from you. Like, you're doing this, but this is not the production we like. Those types of things where people have come to say, and I think that there's two sides. It's like, one, we're losing the ability to articulate and like formulate deep, and I think it's because it's really hard, like, to take a stance on something, because of the other side, which is you want that like dopamine feedback. You want that good feeling that comes when you like go with the flow, or whatever it might be, that comes with people supporting you, even though it's all it is like a double tap on a phone. Yeah. Versus someone like coming up to you and being like, hey, those photos, or like that thing you did, like, that was so awesome. Yeah. Like, we had I was running this weekend with a couple buddies just yesterday, and we were climbing up South Boulder, which is like this huge climb. It's like 1,200 feet or like 1,600 feet over like a mile and a half. So it's just like nice. A 28% grade. Like, you have to power hike. Like, and we were just kind of talking and messing around. And Luke, who was at the front of the group, had said, like, what's the one, like, tell me one good thing that's happened to you this week. And stuff like that, where I love, there's a Heath Ledger quote, and I feel like my life's a cliche. Like, I just live by all these like quotes that all these famous people say, and I'm in my head, I'm just like, yeah, like, that's. And he says, everyone asks like how's your job, like, how's your house or your wife or whatever, and I forget the exact quote, I'm butchering it, but no one asks if you're happy. And it's like, not necessarily that I think that the goal is happy, but I think that we oftentimes let happy things slip through our mind a lot quicker. Yeah. And to even think about that, where he posed that question, to say like, hey, like, take a moment and reflect on your week. Like, what was one thing this week that was really like your high, or like this great thing, that it wasn't about anything other than just genuine human curiosity of like, hey, I want to hear what is going great in your life.
Yeah, and reflect on something dope, you know, and like have gratitude for that moment. I feel like that behavior and that practice actually leads to a better life, and in terms of like recognizing the good things that are happening and having appreciation for them. Yeah. And you're like, oh, okay, like, there's a lot of negativity that's fed to us from the outside world, and therefore we like kind of focus on it. But there's a lot of positive things about living this every day. Like, every day there's positives that can be focused on. If you focus on the positives, it's like a mental practice where you start recognizing positive things over and over and feeling grateful for them. And then like life's just better because you're now focusing on all the good things that happen instead of all the shitty things that happen. And it's like a snowball that just keeps rolling and rolling. And
would you call yourself an optimist?
Yeah, I think so. In general. Yeah, I'm definitely like, I don't know if optimist is the right word, but like you said, like earlier, something you said resonated with me, which is like, when I have a tough time planning for the future, like making goals and like, oh, I'm going to do this and be here in this place. And it's like pretty much the underlying thing that I try and do is like, whatever I'm doing, I just want to be happy. And if I'm not happy, then I need to change up something that I'm doing in my behavior or work, or try and identify what it is, or the place I'm living, or whatever it is inside of me that's not happy, and change it. But if I'm happy, then generally everything else around me is working out. And just with that kind of mentality, that, I don't know, that's my MO. Like, I'm just trying to be happy, and then like if problems arise, like solve problems. So I guess that could make me an optimist. I don't know.
Do you think? And this is a question I've pondered a lot. And there's a guy, Sam Harris, who, and we were talking about this weekend on the run as well. And I think that it's something that I like to ask people, because I feel like it's something that I don't know that a lot of people think about, and or they have like their initial gut take or like their first answer. But do you think if someone were to pose the question to you, what is the meaning of life?
Wow.
And if
Big question.
if you were to respond, like, I think a lot of people, their gut instinct may be something positive, like the meaning of life is like to find happiness, to find love, to find all of these things. And I want to hear your stance before I give you my stance, but
Yeah.
what do you think the meaning of life is?
Ooh. Right now, I believe that the meaning of life is that we have eternal souls. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with this. Like,
Okay.
not really religious, but like the idea that we have, like, energy can't be created or destroyed. And we have we're energetic beings from the core that are in touch with higher dimensions than these three-dimensional planes. And as eternal souls, like, my belief is we're here in these bodies on Earth experiencing these physical and emotional feelings and challenges and experiences that you can't experience as a higher dimensional being, and learning from them. So it's like you come down and you get tested and tried, and like you go through all this love and happiness and sadness and heartbreak, and to make you into and inform your higher self on how to just be a better soul. And that's why we're here, is to like have a meaningful experience and learn something from life that we can carry with our soul after our physical body passes away.
Do you believe in reincarnation?
Yeah, I guess a portion of it, not necessarily in like the Hindu sense where you like can go up and down in like castes, but like, yeah, I think that we've probably lived multiple lifetimes, and like, I don't know, read some interesting books. Can't think of what the name is, but there's this one really interesting book that was about a psychiatrist that does hypnotherapy, and he works with people, and he just keeps having these patients that like go into past life regressions, and they telling him about their past lives and like the people in the past lives, and it's lining up with like people they know now, and maybe that's all some woo shit, but like it feels right and it resonates right with me, and like that you meet people in this life that you've met in previous lives potentially, and you get put in whatever situation that you're supposed to be in that moment to live and learn from this particular lifetime.
Do you think everything happens for a reason?
Yeah. I think there's three things. It's crazy. I was just talking with my mom about this last night, actually. It's like you have control over your life. Like, I believe in like the power of manifesting. So if you picture what you want and you put that energy out there, I want to make more money. Like, that could be something. And you work really hard towards whatever goal and facet that you think you'll make more money in your life. I have, tangible example is like, I was saying this to myself about last fall. It's like, I wasn't making as much money as I wanted to. It's like, I want to make more money. Like, okay, well, what am I going to do to make more money? I'm like, okay, I'm working freelance for this production company. We have a big contract that I'm kind of solo servicing. I think I deserve more to handle the client, handle all the work. So I'm like putting together, like, how do I show that though tangibly? I'm like, all right, I'm going to make a new reel that showcases all the work that I've done and the work that I want to do going forward in the future, and just is a higher quality than the last reel I had. So I'm like actively making this reel, telling people like, yeah, I'm just making a reel. I want to make more money, and putting that energy out there with like positive intentions, like a lot of positivity. And then our project manager like comes down, or managing director comes down, and I wasn't at the cabin. Me and my coworker were living in a cabin in the woods at the time, and stayed at the cabin while I was out of town on a different job, and calls me after 2 days living in the cabin. He's like, dude, I see what you're doing here. You're really like living and working in the backwoods of Washington. Like, this is crazy. I had no idea this is how you guys were living. Like, we got to pay you more. Like, we're giving, and in my head was 13%. I want a 13% raise. And he's like, we're giving you a 15% raise. I was like, fuck, like that's crazy. that all of that just happened. Like, and then conversely, you can manifest negative things into your life by putting out negative energy and in a similar fashion. So also at the cabin, this happened like, not to throw my roommate on the bus, but he hated the cabin. It's this shitty cabin, no insulation. It's in the middle of the woods. It's like an hour and a half outside of Seattle, 30 minutes to the closest grocery store. I thought it was dope because it's on a river. Like, there's elk in the yard. It's like a once in a lifetime type of living experience. So I'm treating it as thus. Like, I know it's not permanent.
Yeah.
And he hated it. He fucking hated the cabin. He was just like, the cabin sucks. There's the Wi-Fi's intermittent. Like, we're far from the climbing gym. I hate it here. I want to move. I'm like, on the counter side, like, but the cabin's nice. Like, all these good things. Like, trying to balance them out. But simultaneously, I'm telling myself, like, hey, I have too many things. I need to donate some of this shit. Like, the cabin's small. I have way too many items. I don't need all this stuff. And I've been saying that repeatedly for like a couple months. Simultaneously, he's saying, I hate the cabin. I want to move. I'm like, I got too many things. I need to get rid of this shit. And I'm not donating them. I just keep saying it, and I'm not doing it. Fast forward to Christmas. Christmas Eve, we're out of town. A friend of ours is house sitting the cabin. Get a call from her, and the pellet stove, which was the main source of heating in the cabin, malfunctioned and burned 35 pounds of these pellets in the hopper instead of in the burn chamber. Hotboxed the whole cabin with this really noxious, toxic, like chemical glue smoke from these pellets. Place is fucked. Like, we're like, okay, well, there's no fire. Like, just open the windows, I guess. A couple days later, we get back. Like, you walk in the house, you get a headache within 2 minutes. Like, all of our stuff reeked. Like, we had to throw everything out. Everything was ruined. We had to move out of the cabin. And it's funny because it's like, we were putting out this energy of like, I have too many things. Oh, and then he's like, I hate this. I want to move. And the universe gives you what you want, but just not in the way that you're expecting it. Or it replicates the energy that you're giving, that we were giving out there. Like, I hate this negative energy, negative vibe. I have too many things. I need to get rid of them. And it gave us exactly what we wanted, but in a really negative way. Where like suddenly we lose all of our possessions.
Do you think in this, because it sounds like you believe, and this is something I've thought about a ton and I ask almost everyone as well, it sounds like you believe in free will.
Yeah.
From a standpoint of like, you control your circumstances, what you put out, that type of thing.
Yeah.
That the flip side of that, I guess, would be determinism, in that like everything's arbitrary and it just happens.
Yeah.
And I think everything happens for a reason. And I don't know if we have free will. But things like that story, it's like you maybe had this thing in your head that you were, like you said, you're putting out this energy and this vibe of like, hey, we have too much stuff and like we want out of this shitty cabin. And like you didn't intentionally do any of that type of thing, where I see kind of aspects of both sides in life of like some people are, manifesting their life. I put this work in, I did this, and this is the result. And then other things in life where it's like, Joe Rogan, for example, he's like, I never planned to have the biggest podcast in the world.
Yeah.
And it's like, it just happened.
Yeah.
And like so many times it's like hard to see both sides. And I think that, and like, I mean, I'm sure you've experienced a lot of really shitty things, and like it's not always sunshine and rainbows. And like I know I have, but from the standpoint of I think in order to believe that everything happens for a reason, I think there has to be aspects of both, of like, so, and whether it, and it's kind of one of those things, the question where I think I don't know if you've ever met someone like this where I don't want to say they're a pessimist, but like realist, or someone who's like, no, that's just the way life is, and like told you so type people, where even if you're just always positive, like when things go wrong, they're like, nah, told you. Like, and I never, as I've become more in like the spiritual aspect, or really exploring spirituality, I feel like so much of life, whether it's free will or deterministic or you believe in God or you believe in whatever. Excuse me. It's like right now all we have is this. And like
Yeah.
Sam talks about it, and he doesn't believe in free will, because his belief is that basically, like, we think we have free will because I can do this. Like I told my arm to raise up.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, so you think you're controlling your actions and what's going on in your life because you have these voluntary disclosures of, whatever.
Yeah.
Movements, I'm going to eat right now or
Yeah.
whatever that might be. But it's interesting because his contradiction to that is, so where does that come from? Like,
yeah.
And you're like, well, I told myself. Like, no, like where, like what
Yeah.
part of your brain are you accessing?
Yeah.
That you're like, okay, I'm entering into this part and saying like, I'm moving my arm to grab this thing.
Yeah.
And to say all that, I think that ultimately finding out these answers doesn't matter to me because it's like, I love to pontificate about it.
Yeah.
But it's like
Yeah, it's
ultimately, like, if someone's like, see, told you it's all predetermined. Like, I'm like, okay, how does that change your life? Like, if it's predetermined, it might change your perception of
Yeah.
like, or your perspective on things. But the same, I got into an argument with someone in Myanmar about evolution. And I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if we came from monkeys. Like, I don't. But I'm like, ultimately, if you're proven right, like if somehow we find out that we actually came from monkeys or it was God and he created Adam and Eve and whatever, I'm like, how does that change anything about what's happening right now?
Yeah.
Like, other than you get to say,
Yeah.
I was
your
right.
Opinion or your beliefs. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, totally. Or aliens. We could be aliens.
It's like, I think too that, and so Sam's point is that he's saying all there is actuality. Like, and it's 30 minutes on, so he's super smart neuroscientist guy. Lex Friedman, super smart engineer. Like, two super smart people talking about this topic that is like, I mean, I've thought about it for probably like 3 weeks now. And it's just like, and it's 30 minutes. Like, they talk about it for 30 minutes. And not even, maybe 10 minutes of that 30 minutes. And it's like, so much of life people think about, well, I could have done that. Or I would do that.
Yeah.
Or maybe I can do that. And it's like, you're always either looking backwards or looking forwards from the standpoint of, like, I can't change this and this hasn't happened. But in order for this to happen, I have to do something right now.
Yeah.
And that's it. And kind of what you had said of, like, I can influence what's around me and, like, what I'm doing in my life. And, like, I can't control other people. Like, I can't. Even, you may not even be able to control yourself if you don't believe in free will. And it's like, but ultimately, what matters is what actually happened. And, like, I think it's interesting, too, to think about that from the standpoint of, like, relationships that have gone bad. Or, like, work that has ended up poorly. Mm-hmm. Or, like, friendships that ended poorly.
Yeah.
That so many times people come back and it's like, hey, like, I'm really sorry, this was wrong, or this was bad, or I did this incorrectly. And it's like, I wish I could change it. And it's like, well, you can't, because that's what happened.
Yeah. You
And
can just learn from it, and that's the best we can do.
And it's like Goggins' thing is start from scratch. It's like we could start this over, and if I'm willing to try to do this thing again, maybe we can.
Yeah.
But it's like, you can't change what you did in the past.
Yeah.
And, like, maybe you have a bad association with that person now.
Yeah.
But and to me, I don't know, it's just really interesting to think about that, of, like, rather than, and I love to pontificate about stuff. Like, I'll go down a rabbit hole all day, but the way he poised it, it's like, I don't know if that's real. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah.
But that's something really hard to think about.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Because we're kind of brought up in, like, a science-based society a little bit. Like, now that religion is kind of taken a back seat and is a bit more laughed at. And you can't prove any of that with the scientific method. And like you said, it's just like I like that. It's like what you said about all we have is now. Like, shit happens in the past, and we can learn from it and, like, try and remedy whatever type of mistake or we made, if it was a mistake, or, love the highs that occurred. But like you said too, it's like all you can do is now and live in this moment. And if you're living in the future about what could happen, or living in the past about like what did happen, then you're not living now of what is happening.
And I think that, like, when you look back, it creates regret, and when you look forward, it can create anxiety. Yeah. And it's like there's, like, even I'm big into running now, and so much of, I mean, if you hang out with people, and I'm extremely competitive. I mean, I wrestled in college, like, I've done sports my whole life. I'm a very competitive person, but you hear some people who, like, their perception and their perspective on whatever it might be, like a race, like, all they're thinking about is, like, who is this person? Like, oh, did you see, this guy signed up for the race you're running? Like, oh, he's so fast. Or, like, and I'm like, no, like, I didn't.
Yeah. Because it's an individual race, right?
Yeah, it's like, it's not, to me, and I also know too, like, for me, I'm never going to be a professional runner or, like, some crazy fast guy.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's never been about that for me. And I think you kind of said it when we were talking about what your thoughts were on the meaning of life, is that trying to become, like, the best version of yourself. And I think that I love this quote, cliche quote, but it's you versus you. Of, like, ultimately, and Jordan Peterson wrote a book called 12 Rules for Life, and one of the rules was compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today.
Yeah.
And I think and that's, I mean, another thing I think about the internet that's terrible is that we live in such a comparison world.
Totally. Yeah.
I mean, Strava is a running app, or biking, and it's literally like you can go in and see who ran what on a segment and go, gosh, well, I'll never be that fast.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, man, like you ran 10 minutes faster than you've ever run that thing. It's like, that's awesome. Yeah. Like, but we get so caught up in this, like,
what's everyone else doing? What should I be doing because someone in my professional or creative or athletic field is doing X, and I should be doing that.
Yeah.
And not focusing on what we're doing now. Yeah, it's a plague. I struggle with that for sure. Just like comparison syndrome, or like imposter syndrome a bit. Or, like, I would have a tough time, not so much anymore, but when I was first getting into creative space and, like, professionally, I would have a tough time, like, being proud of the work I did. Because even though it was, like, the best work I could be doing at the time, I would look at other people's work, like Jimmy Chin. And I'm like, wow, I should be doing it like that. Like, I'm not proud of this because this sucks. And objectively, like, it was, a learning, like, I did suck. But it was the best I could do at the time. But I'm not, it's like, oh, I'm not proud of that. I'm not going to, like, share it or anything. Like, be proud of the work I've done because it's not as good as, like, someone who's an expert. Like, well, that's not healthy. It's it's the best I could do, man. Like, give yourself a pat on the back a little bit.
Well, and that's, I think, and I don't know if, I don't know your upbringing, your background. We can talk about that if you feel comfortable. Yeah. But for me, I feel like I'm very self-critical of myself. From the standpoint of whether it be running or, like, even work you put out. Like, I made a reel for my friend Hannah, and it was just, like, really fast. We shot it in, like, 20 minutes. And it was just she's on Team USA she's in Norway right now. Wow. Or no, Austria. Yeah. Running, like, World Trail Running Championships, hammer of a human. And, like, she got all this USA gear, and I was like, this is so cool. Like, I would love to take pics and, like, make a video. And I made the video, and I gave it to her, and she posted it. And the first thing I was like, gosh, the color grading's bad.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, oh. And I'm like, these transitions are sloppy. Like, you can tell that lens was hunting.
Yeah.
And immediately I'm, like, criticizing.
You see the negative in it, yeah.
And she's just like, well, do you want me to take it down? I'm like, do you like it? And she was like, yeah, I love it. I'm like, okay, then I got to just step away from it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that, and even, like, as I've been going to therapy, one of the things that's come out, and it's weird because I don't really understand the concept of therapy from the standpoint of, like, I don't know what therapy's supposed to look like, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Like I'm
It's
like
different for everybody.
yeah, exactly. Like just very and I overanalyze things for sure.
Yeah.
But one of the things that came away, because a lot of what I do is very self-reflective. Like even if I talk about something and I'm trying to process it verbally, I'll go on a run and I'll think about it for hours. And it's like, I was thinking about, like, why am I so self-critical? And I think part of it comes from, like, my upbringing. I was one of 5 boys. Like, we were all athletics, school, all that type of stuff, where it's, like, easy to compare yourself.
Sure, yeah.
And I became very self-focused in that, like, I want to prove that I'm good enough. Even though that was never projected.
Right.
Like, hey, you're not good enough.
Where were you in, like, the oldest to youngest range?
It's kind of a weird, so my dad was married.
Okay.
Got divorced, but had my older brother. And then when he was 9, him and my mom had, so he got remarried.
Yeah.
My mom helped raise my older brother.
Yeah.
But I didn't, and I don't even remember the time period to be exact of, like, I didn't know when I found out that he was my half brother. Like, it was later in life.
Yeah.
So from a birth order perspective, to me, I was never raised as, like, this is my half brother.
Right.
So technically I'm the oldest. Like, I was like, I have an older brother.
Right.
And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
I also have a twin brother.
Okay.
So twin brother who's 2 minutes older than me. And so technically I'm kind of the middle child. If you were to,
yeah.
from a
Put in
technical,
chronological
it's
timeline.
like older brother who's 9 years older, twin brother who's 2 minutes older than me, then 2 younger brothers who are significantly younger. So I have a 23-year-old brother and a 25-year-old brother.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and I'm 31.
Okay.
So it's like 8 years older than my youngest, 6 years older than the second youngest.
Yeah.
And then 9 years younger than my oldest. Yeah. So it was very, for me, I think growing up with a twin, in my head, and this is something I just, like, worked through recently, of just, like, I think I lived in comparison, and I think a lot of my, like, negative self-talk came from that, where it wasn't anything that my parents did, it was just very self-imposed.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, I need to prove myself, like, I'm, like, this, and this.
Yeah.
And it was really weird where I struggled with it for a long time until I found, like, wrestling, and even then now, like, I kind of just, and I'm a big believer your interests choose you, like, you don't choose your interests, where I kind of just go all in on things. Like, I'm like, that's cool, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And then I just try to surround myself with people who do that. But for me, I think that's, like, a big thing where a lot of that has come from, of, like, I'm not good enough, like, you need to be better.
Yeah.
Like, you're putting out stuff like this, like, dude, look at this reel, like, or look at this photo.
Right.
Or, like, even...
and you see the negatives in it, and not necessarily, like, do you feel like you get a moment where you're like, oh, I'm putting this out and I'm proud of it? Or, like, do you experience that at all, whether before or after it comes out, if it, like, does well or something?
I've only had it a few times. Like, I always, and I think that Peter McKinnon says this, it's better done than perfect. And I think that the only way to progress is to actually do it. And I think a lot of times, like, we get so caught up in all these other things that, like, actually stop you from just doing the thing. Like, and even I know we all get busy, and I'm terrible about this as well. If, like, hey, I have this idea for a video shoot. Like, let's do this thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, I never make the time to, like, actually storyboard it and put this out and be like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to shoot at this time. And, like, where in my head, I have a better image of what, like, the video I want to produce.
Yeah.
And I just haven't done it.
Yeah.
And so it's hard, but you have to, I feel like the only way to progress is to do.
Yeah. You just got to do it at some level. I'm the same way, though. Like, it's like I have all these ideas.
Yeah, it's...
Like, oh, this would be so sick to do. And I tell a couple of people, like, yeah, it's a great idea. You should do it. And then, like, the idea, like, flits around and then it goes away. You know? And it's like I end up doing, like, 1 in 30 ideas that come across. Like,
well, and do you feel like that's, like, I don't want to call it a curse, but, like, what comes from being in the creative field?
Probably. Yeah. Probably just, like, I think we're all creative people, and you just all have ideas, and like ideas will flit into our brains and kind of have a life of their own, and they like look for a home. And they're like, oh, like maybe this will be the person to bring this idea into physical reality. And then like either the circumstances are right or wrong, and then it flits away and someone else does the idea.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh well, made peace with it in a way. Like, it just wasn't meant for me. But it's hard because sometimes it's like I had an idea of like doing a warlock crossover beast summoning bike shoot. It's like, I don't know, like this would be so sick to do. And now I'm not gonna do it. Like it's a sick idea, like, but I'm not gonna put it together and like do it. And then actually also, it was for this company Forbidden, and then they released a video that was like eerily similar, like 2 weeks after I had the idea. I'm like, oh, okay, it's kind of already done. Like, no need to follow it up, And then sometimes it's like the negative self-talk happens. You're like, you never make anything happen.
Yeah.
You don't produce shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what you do produce is shit. And then I gotta remind myself to love myself. Like,
yeah.
Okay, everything's okay. Like,
yeah. No, that's and I think it's hard because especially creative and from a personality standpoint, like trait openness is associated with creative people in that like you're open to ideas and you like have this ability to like kind of be almost fluid with ideas of like, oh, that sounds really cool. Like, what if I connected that with this? And like, what if I added a little bit of that over here? But then the problem is that then you need people operationally and or like execution people that like can take that and then build it.
Yeah.
Like,
and someone to pay for it.
Exactly.
Generally speaking.
Yeah.
If you're, like, unless you're in a really lucky scenario where like you either have a lot of money or you have someone that's willing to take a risk, it's like half of the ideas are like, well, okay, I need $5,000 to like pay for the talent, pay for the studio space, pay 2 camera operators to like come and help. Like, check a bank account, like it doesn't look like I have that right now to do this solo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, oh well, c'est la vie.
And that's I think that's what's hard too. And this, I mean, I feel like this is the issue too with Instagram. Like a lot of people, and I think that as phones have gotten better and as technology has gotten better, all of that has allowed people to create better things because we have better tools. But I think ultimately, and it's the same thing when you see like, I don't know if you know like Liver King.
I've heard. Is that the really
jacked like
dude?
And he was like, it's all because I live these ancestral tenets. And you see these like fitness influencers and they're like, I got jacked because I took this supplement.
Right.
And it's like, well, it's also because you were taking steroids.
Yeah.
Like, which
you
is
tell people about that one.
Yeah, like, and even like reels and stuff. Like you look at someone who puts out like really high quality content, and you're like, wow, that's really great. Yeah. And sometimes it's shot on an iPhone.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it's shot on like really high end cameras. Yeah. Even though it's a reel.
Yeah.
Or even though it's a photo, it's like they're shooting 500 photos.
Yeah.
To get one.
That one. Yeah.
And it's like so much of what people put out is not actually like even and that's why I think
reality.
Exactly.
Like,
exactly.
You don't see the hard work behind it. You don't see the process behind what it takes to look like Liver King. Dude, that reminds me, I like rode up the chairlift with this guy last year who has like 1.2 million followers on Instagram, and he's a camera person like us, shooting something, and so we started talking. I didn't know who he was at the time. We were just like both had cameras, so we started chatting, and he's like, yeah, I go around the world and I like get hired to go to like all these beautiful places and basically promote them, and like I'm like, wow, that sounds amazing. And he's uber successful online, and he started telling me, he's like, yeah, it sounds amazing, but man, like I have so much pressure to put out high quality reels on Instagram and like keep the followers engaged. And he's like, I'm killing myself. Like all I really want to do is like turn off and like just be with my girlfriend. But like I have to do this stuff. I feel obligated, and I'm like roped into this like social game. Yeah. And so even though he's like posting the most beautiful things, and he's like worked really hard at acquiring the life he has right now, he's like tortured by it simultaneously. And it's like, whoa, like even though it looks like paradise, that what his life is, he's like, he's not happy,
Yeah.
you know, like doing what he's doing, but he feels like he has to keep doing it because, and maybe I just caught him on a bad day too. But,
Yeah.
like,
Well,
it was just kind of interesting.
I think it's interesting too because ultimately that's I've met influencer people and like you see some of the things that they do and then you meet them and it's like, oh, that looks really cool, and it's like, dude, I haven't slept in the same bed in like 6 months.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I felt that like when I traveled, it was like there was a point in time where I was just like, can I just like sleep in the same place for like, I just want to sleep in the same place for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Just some like, can we go to a gym?
Yeah.
For like 20
That's
minutes.
crazy.
Like you get where I think, and it's an Alan Watts thing. It's when the super cliche that everyone did for like 2 years where it's like, what would you do if money were no object? And it's like his voice overlaid with like some building crescendo music.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, if money weren't real, like what would you do? And like do that because everything else doesn't matter. And then it's like cliche person, like girl standing on a cliff and her dress is blowing in the wind and like like all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
But if you actually listen to like the whole speech, he talks about like, what would you do if money were no object? Like go and do that. But also, do you know what comes with what you want? And like be careful what you wish for because you may actually get it. And I think that's a big thing that so many people see this other life or this other thing and they're like, man, like I'd be so much happier if I was doing that.
Yeah.
Or like, man, I would love this thing so much more if I could just do this.
Yeah.
And it's like,
dude,
you have no idea like the struggles that comes with whatever it is. And like, have you played through that of what actually happens when you're a content creator and you have to put out a reel every like 3 days?
Yeah.
That's high quality content showcasing what you're doing. Like,
yeah.
I mean, we used to, when I was doing hostel work in Asia, like literally we would have to order, and again, this is like the most trivial thing ever because like most of these countries, people are so poor that they're sleeping like on bamboo slats. So it's like we would have to order one thing off the menu, like everything basically, like every meal you have to order something different to take pictures of it.
Oh yeah.
So it's like you would order something off the menu and you're like, I don't really want to eat this, and
right.
it would come out and then you're like, okay, well we can't eat it, and then we'd have to like go talk to a random person like, hey, like we're photographers, we work for the hostel, like I can get you a free meal if you would like let us take pictures of you with this meal.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, okay, cool, like I can have that. I'm like, yeah, sure. And then they come over and you take pictures and like and then eventually like half an hour later you get to eat their food.
Right.
And it's like it's not even the food you want.
Yeah.
And you can never just like when you're starving, it's like, oh, this food came out, I'm so hungry.
Yeah.
And you're just like,
good.
you're like, well, I gotta wait. Like,
Oh, dude.
and it's like
crazy.
and the same thing. Like we'd come into a room and you're like, oh, dude, I've been on a bus for like 12 hours. Like, I just want to take a shot. And it's like before you take a shower, before you touch the sheets, before you put anything into a drawer,
Yeah.
you have to take pictures of the room.
Yeah.
And it's like we're opening shades, we're like placing. You have to find someone to come sit or like a model or what. And you're like, hey, could you come? Like, let me buy you a drink. Like, come sit on this bed.
Yeah.
For like 20 minutes so I can take your picture. And they're like, what are these pictures for? Like, it's like it's Instagram and it's like going on the website and for graphic design and all. And like, again, not that that's like bad, but it's like,
you see the picture.
Yeah.
I see the picture.
Yeah.
You are the one doing all the fucking hard work behind it. That's like, and like, when you share that, it's like, oh, I share the picture. Like, this is what I'm doing right now. I'm just like in Asia, making a living, creating content and traveling around and experiencing the world. And like, that's the message I get. But instead it's like, yeah, we're fucking on a bus for 15 hours and we're sweaty. And then we get to the story you just said. It's like, holy shit. Like that's so much work.
Yeah.
That takes, and then like, you gotta love the grind to be able to like put your nose into that grindstone and like do that for, how long were you traveling for?
It was like 2.5 years total.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And it's very, and it's kind of one of those things that I think a lot of people,
Mad respect, by the way.
which, and I mean, like, we also still got to get back to how you got into video. But it's very, like you look at those things, and I think that I love this quote, that whatever you do becomes normal. And so often, people look at, like, man, that would be cool. And it's, you appreciate those moments, and it's, like, great when you get these experiences. But it's, like me scuba diving. Living in Indonesia, I was doing underwater photography.
Yeah.
And certified dive master, like, finished my DM there, had done 200 plus dives, and, like, shout out to my instructor, Eric. But, like, when you see manta rays 5 days a week for 4 months, you're like, and people are like, mantas, oh my gosh, and you have to give the same speech. Like, hey, I'm the photographer. You're not going to look at me ever. You're going to look at your instructor. Like, the main focus of this is you guys enjoy the environment. Please don't touch the animals. Like, don't hold your breath, because if you hold your breath, you're going to inflate your lungs, which is going to make you go up. It's going to make you positively buoyant, and, like, you're going to float to the surface. And, like, all these things that it's just, like, like, you just have, where it's like, oh my gosh, you did underwater photography in Indonesia. That's so insane. It's like, yeah, I mean,
so exotic.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, I mean, you could do that too, but it's also like whatever you do is normal.
Yeah.
So, like, and I think that's there's a quote, I think it's Socrates or someone real smart and probably dead, that says, if all the human species had to do was worry about, like, eating food and continuing of the lineage of the species, like, it would last a week before we would blow it all up.
Yeah.
Because it's like, even though we're creatures of habit and routine, I think that there's always a balance of, like, order and chaos. Mm-hmm. And I think some people are more order, like, hey, I need regiment, I need this, like, Monday through next Sunday, I know exactly what I'm doing. And then there are people who are literally flying by the seat of their pants, that you're just winging it and saying yes, or, like, going wherever, doing whatever. Like, that type of stuff, that I think there's a balance of yin and yang and, you know, order, chaos, whatever you want to call it. But so much of life is not just about, like, reaching this point where you're like, well, now I can do that thing. Yeah. Because it's like, okay, well, what if you're planning to work for 30 years? It's like, okay, what if you only work 20 years and you hit that goal? Right. Like, then what? Yeah. Like, you have this arbitrary metric that is
midlife crisis.
You buy a sports car, and you dye your hair black.
What will make me happy now?
Yeah, it's very, and I think that that's ultimately the thing that I'm very, like, hey, you just kind of have to enjoy whatever this is. And sometimes it's not always going to be great, and a lot of times it's going to be right in the middle. Yeah. But, like, if you constantly are looking at, like, well, once I reach this thing, like, I want to be Jimmy Chin. Yeah. I want to be hanging off the side of a wall filming Alex Honnold soloing up, like, the biggest faces in the world. And it's like, Jimmy Chin has been pooping in a bag for, like, 3 weeks, eating, like, recycled, like, hot water, those, like, instant meal. Yeah. Like, he's lost 12 pounds. He hasn't seen his wife or kids in months. Like, some of these things that, like, we look at this and we think that's what I want to do. Yeah. But it's ultimately like, is that really what you want to do? Like, and I think your story is, like, a great example of that.
Yeah. Well, and it's hard, like you were saying, like, Instagram, you see it, you, like, I want to do that. You know, that's what I want to do. Well, go do it. Like, there's nothing stopping you except yourself. And like you said, it's just like, why focus on something intangible that's in the future, and as, like, if I get there, I'll be happy. If I just get this one more thing, I'll be happy. Like, then I'll be successful. Then I'll be X. If I just make another $1 million, like, then I'll be happy. And you're just chasing the fucking dragon. It's like, my fucking, not to bring up my roommate again, but it's just a pertinent example. It's like, I was living with him, and he was like, man, he's kind of newer to filmmaking. He's been 2 years, but, like, has worked really fucking hard, and he's really talented. And, or, like, he's talented, but I don't like talent, because people are rarely, like, talented. It's like, you just do what you do, and you work really hard, and then you get good at it. So he's, like, worked really hard, and he's good. But he's like, all right, like, I want to make commercial work. Like, I don't really like doing ski stuff. I want to do commercial, just like commercial stuff. So I'm gonna get this opportunity to do a commercial for a tech company. It's like very commercial work, studio setup, lights, script. Gotta like shoot the people right and make them look beautiful. We do it. He's like, I don't like commercial work. Okay, what I want to be doing is, branded documentary. I want to make a documentary. And so it's like, okay, cool. Like that opportunity happens to come across his plate next. And it's like, we make this documentary about trail running nurses, and it's not quite branded because no one wants to fund it, but we ended up making it. And then it's like, if I could just actually, like, I don't really like that. Like, if I could just be doing some other thing, and it's like, whoa, bro, like, you've changed your mind 3 times now. That's totally okay, but, like, you're not happy while you're doing it.
Yeah.
And, like, you're down on yourself. It's like, why don't we just, like, enjoy what we have right now, and then, like, when the next opportunity comes, like, the next opportunity comes, and you just, like, decide if that's right for you. But instead it kept being like, and he's like, I want to be a world famous director. That's his goal. So he's like, if I'm a world famous director, then, like, I'll be successful. And it's like, oh shit, man, just chasing the dragon. Like, you're gonna get to that world famous director level, which would hopefully be, people would look at it and be like, perceived success. But like, that's why you want to do it. If you want to be a world famous director for the sake of being a world famous director, you're not going to be happy when you get that goal. It's like, you got to be happy with who you are now in any walk of life, or no matter what you're doing. Like, doesn't matter where you live or what you're doing. If you're not at peace with yourself, whenever you get to be that $1 million or famous, or you become a different person, like, you're still living with yourself. Or if you move somewhere, like, you can never escape you. And if you're not happy with yourself and at peace with yourself or love yourself, you're not going to love yourself or be happy with yourself when you do achieve whatever tangible goal you're looking for, is my opinion.
Well, and I think that there's a few important things there, though. One is grow, even if it's in the wrong direction, in that you'll never know what going down a road looks like until you go down the road.
Yeah.
And it's better to go down a road for 2 miles and go, shit, I went down the wrong road.
Yeah.
And now I got to go all the way back to where I was previously, which is going to take days and months and years, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's better to do that than to keep going knowing that you're going down the wrong road and keep going down the wrong road.
Yeah, totally.
Where, your roommate saying like, hey, I want to be a documentary filmmaker, and then makes a documentary and is like, okay, no, actually,
yeah,
like, I just spent 6 months doing that and I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you just did that to find out that you didn't want to do that.
Totally.
And I'm guessing you picked up some skills along the way.
Yes.
Like, and that's great.
Yeah.
But it's like, now you know, and I think that that's something too, like, even like talking to younger people. We went to a career fair and we were talking to like college freshmen, and I'm like, I am so gosh damn old. Like, and these 2 girls walk up to our booth, and like, my colleague was talking to one and I was talking to the other, and she was like, hey, I'm not, like, I don't know what I'm this major, but I'm thinking about maybe minoring in this, or whatever. And I go, hey, like, I'm not telling you that you need to apply to an internship with us and like try to find a job, and I'm like the worst self-promoter ever. Like, yeah. I'm literally like, do what you think is right. But I'm like, you'll never know if you do or don't like something until you do it. And like, there's no way, like, if you only stick with, and I think that this is ultimately leading to a question I have for you, but I think a lot of people are afraid to step outside of what they know. Mm-hmm. And I think whether that's like talking to a cute girl at a gym, yeah, or like taking on a new, like, I want to run a 50K, or yeah, I want to run 100 miles, or yeah, like, I want to make a documentary. I want to start a podcast. Yeah. I want to, whatever it is. Exactly. Yeah. It's like, you're looking at the things where it's like, this is so intimidating because I've never done this before.
Yeah.
And
I
even
don't know what I'm doing.
And
sometimes
I think it's wild because like how, I mean, have you ever, I feel like I say this to myself all the time. I started a new job 6 months ago, and I literally was like, oh my gosh, like, these are all the things I have to, like, work through. And now it's like, it's been 6 months, and I'm like, okay, I have a significantly better understanding and grasp on what it is I'm doing. When, had I not taken the risk to go through the process to get into this position, it's like you would have never crossed that bridge. You're just like, oh, that would be really cool to do that thing.
Yeah.
But so many times the fear of failure and or the fear of...
Yeah. Fear of failure. That's what you make me think of a lot.
It's like
this one.
You can't... You don't know unless you go.
Yeah.
And even, it's better to... Even, like, when I quit my job to travel, I've been to 4 countries, I think. And I was like, okay, I'm in a position where I have some money and, like, I don't know what I want to do.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that this is what I want to do the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And I had a friend who was like, hey, like, I'm leaving for Europe in September. And this was, I don't remember the exact dates, but, like, probably 8 months before. And I was like, okay, I've, like, traveled with some people. Like, I've gone to other countries. I'm like, this is kind of cool. I was like, I'm going to go to Peru by myself. And I'm going to plan out a trip. I'm going to film the whole thing. I think I just had a GoPro at the time. I, like, no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I was like, if I end up liking this, like, traveling by myself, I think I'm going to quit my job and do it. And I went, like, had the best time of my life. And I just remember thinking, like, I don't know if this is what the rest of the world's going to be like. But I'm like, I think there are good people everywhere. And I think that this is all part of, and this is kind of my life philosophy, coming back to what you were talking about of, like, if I reach this thing and if I, that my ultimate goal is to find out who I could become. It's like, you are who you are now, like everything that's led you to this exact moment, plus the potential of who you could become. Yeah. And you have no idea what that unknown variable is. But, and we were just talking, me and my buddy Darren were talking about this on the way back from our run this morning, and it's, honestly, I should probably get it tattooed on me because that's who I am. But it's, hell is when the person you are meets the person you could have been. Mm. And I think that the only way you find out who you could have been is if you step outside of that fear situation that says, like, hey, like, I don't know if I can do this, whether it's imposter syndrome or you're afraid to make a change because everything... You're, like, in a zone where you're comfortable. And it's like you can only grow so far once you're in a position where you know everything, you know how to solve the problems. It's just constantly solving those problems. And I think for me, that's been a constant stimulation in my life is, like, I want more. And ultimately, and that leads me to this question for you is, and my answer, I've thought about this probably, like a decade of just, what does this mean to me? And so the question I want to ask you is ultimately all of that, talking about fear hindering decisions and stepping outside of your comfort zone. What would you say is your deepest fear for life? Ooh. And the second part of that is, when you look back on your life, how would you define it as successful?
Those are good questions.
And by fear, I don't mean like spider, you know, like, just like true,
physical, like, or
things that you've maybe thought about that you're like, what, like this, that's beyond just, you know, like, the other day I was on a trail run and I cried for like 10 minutes because I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about this, I think he actually won American Idol. Beautiful voice. I'll have to show you the video. 18-year-old lost his dad like 2 months before this. And his dad was the first person to give him a guitar.
Wow.
And, like, he's singing this James Blunt song. And I was, like, broke. I was running. And I'm just, like, and no one's out there because I run it, like, serial killer times. But it's, like, I'm just running and crying on North Table.
Yeah.
And it's, like, I'm hearing about this guy who's singing about his, like, this, basically this ballad to, like, who his dad was from, and it was a James Blunt song. And I was like, this is so incredible. But, and I think that, I mean, I feared that type of stuff. Like, you know, I'm afraid when my parents, when am I going to lose my parents? Like, when Like that's tough, and not necessarily that I fear, but I know it's going to be tough. So
Yeah.
beyond that,
Yeah. I think I haven't really thought about it that much, but the most pressing thought that comes to mind is like when I die, no one shows up to my funeral. Like I don't. That would be a indicator of an unsuccessful life for me, and like something I'm scared of. Where it's like I want someone to show up to my funeral. You know, like to have made an impact enough on somebody that they show up to mourn me. Just just one person. But if no one shows up, it's like, fuck, Jesus fucking Christ.
well, trust me, Henry, you're gonna have a lot of people show up. You've impacted a lot of people's lives.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think about that fear thing too much.
Because would that be your answer to a successful life? Or is that a synonymous answer?
It's part of a successful life. Like that's I guess an indicator that you impacted people in a positive way, a meaningful way.
Yeah.
If like people show up to your funeral. I think like a successful life for me is like trying to live authentically within like the moral parameters that I set and like live in a balance of like selfishness and selflessness where like I do things for me because like it's my life and I want to live for me, but then also like sacrificing some of my time for other people and for other endeavors to like contribute to a greater whole or just contribute to impacting like their life positively. And like even though maybe I don't get anything directly out of it, it's meaningful enough, and like the meaning that it gives to somebody else maybe is meaning enough for me. But and then like being happy, like I think just pure happiness and like living in love, like loving others and loving myself is successful for me. What about you?
I think I've thought more about the fear aspect, and I think that I'm a huge Jordan Peterson fan, and I know he's super controversial, but he talks about oftentimes we only focus on one aspect, and so like the things I need to do in order to be, successful, air quotes.
Yeah.
But I think that, and I haven't quite defined what that would be for me. Like I think some of that revolves around relationships, and I think there's probably a fairly heavy portion of that, like friendships. If I ever trick a girl into stick around and get married and have a family and all of that, like that type of stuff. I think that a lot of that, of kind of speaking to what you were saying about the funeral, not necessarily that I've thought about it in that terms, but more so of I want to build deep and meaningful connections with people. And I think that that's like, and I think there's also a difference between meaning and fulfillment. That's a whole nother rabbit hole, but I think that people are what make this life so beautiful. And so ultimately, I think part of a successful life is that. I think part of that is also some factor of growth in that, like, David Goggins puts it as like, you're wringing out a towel and you've wrung like every last drop out of that towel. And not from the perspective of, you had said something where it's not that I look at life transactionally. It's not that I'm doing this thing with something in expectation of return or like, some type of return on investment.
Yeah.
But that I've, walked the path that I was supposed to walk, and I've turned over the stones that I was supposed to turn over.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to look back and think, and I think about this a lot dating and business and your career, where it's like, I kind of go all in and I'm like, I'm going to make sure that I leave no stone unturned, where it's like, this is an opportunity, I'm going to pursue it fully. And I'm not going to think, like, I don't want to look back and think, oh, I should have, like when I was 22, I should have done that.
Yeah.
It's like, so I think part of success is that, like, really wringing the towel out. But I think it's also things that are not the doing side. So I think that to me, a successful life is not deterministic based off of like what I did in my career. Like I think that some portion of growth may be under that, but me becoming the VP of Google or whatever. Like, that's not how I define success in my life.
Yeah.
And I think it's also not accomplishment in that, like if I became a super great trail runner and I won everything and did every course record, and it's like, is that cool? Yes. But is that ultimately the overarching goal for something like that? Is I'm trying to find out who I could be.
Yeah.
And a part of that is trail running.
Yeah.
So I think the successful question is a bit harder for me, but this is one I've thought about a ton, is what am I afraid of? Mm-hmm. And I think that oftentimes fear is crippling because people are afraid of what could happen. And kind of what you had said earlier of basically if someone else is doing it, you can do it. So like when you see those people doing that thing and you're like, oh, like I wish I could, or maybe it's like you can, because that's a person and you're a person. Like, is it going to be the same path? Is it going to be the same amount of work?
Yeah.
Like maybe it's more, maybe it's less. I mean, we're not going to be LeBron James, but like, could you have been insert this? It's like, probably, because people are doing it.
Yeah.
So if people are doing it, I truly believe that you can do it.
Yeah.
And there are physical limitations within that, but for the most part, it's like pursue a goal and find out.
Yeah.
But I think my deepest fear, and this, I've thought way too much about this stuff. I feel like I go down these rabbit holes, whether it's with another person or a stranger or myself, just all the time. But
dude, that's awesome.
Like, there's a scene in Marley and Me. Have you seen Marley and Me?
I haven't seen it.
It's heartbreaking. Yeah. It's so heartbreaking.
It's what everyone says. I can't watch it.
Yeah, it's especially if you're a dog person. It's like, oh. But anyway. Towards the end, they basically have been moving around a bunch for Owen Wilson's job. And he finally gets this position. They have 3 kids. They're living in this, like, somewhere, I think in Philadelphia, or like suburb with some land and grass and like a townhome, like nice white picket fence, red door situation.
Yeah. And
Jennifer Aniston is in the house. It's like late at night. She's dancing with Marley. Like, it's all slow motion shot, like 120, just beautiful, crispy lighting, everything. And Owen Wilson pulls into the driveway, and it's kind of like dusk. And he's sitting in the car, and he turns his car off. And he's like staring through the window at Jennifer Aniston and the dog. And like eventually she notices and is like, what the hell? Like, come in the house. Like, what are you doing? You're just sitting in the driveway? What is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Like, your kids are like ready to go to bed. And they end up getting to this thing and like this tiff where like everyone goes to bed, and he's like, well, I'm thinking about this thing, like this other thing. And she's like, are we ever going to be enough? Like, is this ever going to be enough for you? That, like, you're always trying to get more.
Yeah.
And I think that my deepest fear is that I won't be happy or won't be okay with where I'm at. From the standpoint of, like, and I almost have this, like, cyclical nature.
Yeah.
Where it's, like, 2, 3, 4 years go by, and I'm like, okay, so now what? Yeah. Like, is this it? And not necessarily, I mean, I've been single for like a decade, like not from a relationship standpoint, but from a, like, what am I doing with my life? And even like just like, am I okay with where I'm at? Like, and I should be happy with where I'm at.
Yeah.
Like, will that ever, manifest in a bad way in the future?
Yeah. Because
it's like when you're constantly, chasing the dragon, like it's just. And I wonder if that bleeds back into, like, me having an insecurity around not being enough.
Yeah.
Of, like, well, shit, like, I need to do more. I need to be better. And I'm very self-deprecating. And most of the time it's, like, very humorous because I say things that I know are not intentional.
Yeah.
But I think there's always a hint of truth in it.
Yeah.
Where, like, part of me remembers those other things where it's like, hey, you need to keep grinding.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that, and
this is never enough.
Yeah, it's like Rogan says it in a way where he was living with his grandma, and she was terminally ill, like had, I think, dementia, and he lived with her for a year. And when he moved out, like 3 months later, she passed away, and he was like, and it's in all the stupid cliche motivational things, but like, he talks about it where so many times we lose sight of that this existence is terminal. Like, this is limited.
Yeah.
And if you forget that, like those days where you like slept in, or those days where you didn't do the thing, or like even this, like I've been procrastinating doing a podcast. One, I mean, it's hard to get people to do a podcast, but it's like also two, like doing a podcast is hard. Like, especially if you're with someone you don't know. Like, but from the standpoint of like one day you're going to look back and go, gosh, like I wish I would have like done that thing. Because when you look at an old person, you know, I'm 31. Yeah. Like, you're like, oh, I have so much life left. Yeah. But it's like, at some point, you're going to be that old person. Yeah. And you don't associate. And that's why we do all these things to, like, counteract it. Like, inject filler into our face and shit. That's, like, hard to deal with. Yeah. And even, like, I'm balding. And it's, like, really hard. I'm like, shit, this sucks, dude. Yeah. Like, I'm doing, like, stuff to try to stop me from balding. Yeah. But it's, like, ultimately, we all turn into that thing. Yeah. And then ultimately, it's over.
Ashes, baby. 3 generations. No one remembers us.
Yeah, it's like, so all of these things that you aren't sure of, I think if you lose sight of that, you forget to like take chances and go for things. And I think that ultimately the other side of that coin is like, if you do take those chances, sometimes you become obsessed with that, and it's like hard to be okay with where you're at. And just enjoy, like, hey, like, this is awesome. I have this. Yeah. Like this is so cool that I get to be able to do this. Like, I love, and again, I mean, I want to get back to how you got into video work, but like the work you're doing now, and I'm sure there's days where it's like, nah, like, but it's so awesome that you're doing a ton of work in kind of the outdoors industry, where I feel like that's one thing that I've really enjoyed is with trail running now. I've loved like filming, and like I've been experimenting. I just got a new phone, and I've been doing a lot of that where it's like, oh, this would be like, I'm gonna take my phone, let me see what this would turn out like. And like, how stable is this actually if I'm running with a phone? Yeah. Because you can't, I mean, if I'm following someone on a trail, it's like, and or we have to run to a peak, it's like, I can run to a peak, but can I run to a peak with like 12 pounds of camera gear? Like, I don't know. Like, then I'm gonna have to get up at 3 a.m. instead and get up there before they get up there. Right. Where all of these other variables, where it's not just like, hey, like you're filming this awesome skiing stuff. Like same thing. I feel like people always want to be a ski bum. They're like, dude, it'd be so sick. You'd ski so much. And it's like, you ski almost no days. Like if you're a ski instructor, you're skiing with little kids all day. Yeah. Like, or a lifty where you're just scanning passes, and it's like, damn, you don't actually get to do the thing that you thought it was. Yeah. So
you never know until you go and try it, though. Yeah, you're like, oh, I'll go do it. And then you're like, well, maybe this isn't for me. Like you were saying.
How did you,
real quick, though, I want to come back to your fear, because that's a real fear. I think that's like I felt that for sure. The same thing of like, am I satisfied with this that's happening? And I think a lot of people feel that way too. It's like, in the rest of our life, there's indicators that are telling us like when we do right or do wrong things, and like you get a gold star, you get some points and some social credits or a grade on a test, and you're like, oh, I'm doing good. And then there's nothing in life really that's like a direct in your face indicator of like, am I living a life that's like good for me? You know, it's like, it looks different for everybody except for money, in a way, in a twisted way. And like, that's not real, but like, oh, you could be like, oh, I'm making a lot of money, that's a positive indicator that I'm doing something right. But like you were saying, like, am I gonna be satisfied with the life that I'm living? And like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? Like, yeah, I was having the same existential question like a month ago. Like, ski season ended, I'm like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? Like, Jesus Christ, I was burned out. Like, what am I'm living in the fucking woods. Like, what am I doing, you know? Yeah. I think that's real questions. And it's like, okay, I'm going on vacation. Like, like, I need to, like, I've been go. I need to just stop and think. And then, like, in that quiet time, you have time to, like, quiet your mind down and, like, reflect on what your life is. And I think that's so important, where it's like, okay, like now I have a chance to actually look at it because I'm outside of myself in a new location, like on the beach. I went to Hawaii, like everyone does. Everyone should go to Hawaii at some point. I mean, it's amazing.
It looks beautiful.
Yeah, the energy there's crazy, and like, yeah, it's there's the whole tourism industrial tourism complex that is a totally separate thing, but like if you have the chance to go, you should go. It's amazing because we have these opportunities in this life that we can do these things.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I'm like sitting there, and all of a sudden I'm able to like look outside of myself, eat a little bit of mushrooms.
Okay.
And I'm like, what's really important to me right now? Like my grandfather's birthday is next weekend, and I wasn't gonna go because I didn't want to spend $500 on a flight.
Yeah.
And then I'm like kind of tripping on the beach, and I'm looking at reflecting on my life. I'm like, am I really not gonna go to my grandfather's 97th birthday, which might be the last one he has, because I'm worried about $500?
Yeah.
Like, is that the life with meaning that I'm supposed to be living? And I was like, okay, no, I'm going to my grandfather's birthday, and like I'm looking back on like living in the woods and skiing and like creating this, like just being a content creator for a ski resort. And it's like, if I think too hard about it, I'm like, oh, is creating content really what I'm supposed to be doing? And then it's like, oh, how many other people get to ski like every day for their job, like and do it like really fun? Like I got to have so much fun. It's like, okay, life's okay. Like we don't need to keep chasing the dragon here. Like I can try and get better at my craft and like do things to, you know, enhance my life around skiing. But like, okay, like being able to pause and reflect and like, and like take a breath is like so helpful to then assessing your life in that way, I feel like. But the fear you feel is real, and I think a lot of people would resonate with that. Like, just, are you satisfied?
Well, and
will I be satisfied? And I look at what you have, I'm like, damn, dude, doing pretty damn good from like my perspective, you know, like we're our own harshest critics.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know? And so it's like, I'm like, shit, dude, like I love the work you do, and this is a sick studio that you have, and I'm like, damn, this is sick. Like, what you have going on with the Airbnb, and like, this is dope.
And I think it's the thing you said there, and this is something that why I'm so grateful for the time that I traveled. And we actually were talking at work. There's a group called Women in Rexel, and they like put on this book club, and they're actually reading Atomic Habits right now. And one of the things that they were talking about is like we get so caught up in like all, and I think the book's great, like, but I think that without the ability to do what you just talked about, like all of that is for naught. In that, had I not traveled, like I'm so grateful for the time that I traveled, and why I bring up the book club was because they talk a lot about like, oh, this thing from this book, like we could all implement this in our lives, and I was like, one of the things that I think when we're building up to a new challenge or a new thing, it's not necessarily that we focus on the challenge, like in the challenge. It's the leading up to the challenge and then the reflection after the challenge. And I think that whether we're making a career move or whatever it is, we do steps 1 and 2, but we never get to 3. And the problem is that I think that 3 is probably the most important. And I mean, throughout college, I worked for this company for 3 years before I quit. And like the time that I had traveling where it was like, this was the first time where I was no longer in the mindset of doing. I was more so in the mindset of like being. And I think that when you're constantly doing, you're chasing that dragon of like, you're focused on, I'm just going to keep grinding on this thing. And I think that that's important. But I think also similar to what you're saying, at some point you're going to get burnt out, or you're going to feel these feelings where you're like doubting everything you're doing in your life. And you don't take time to separate from what that is to then come back to it, to have appreciation for it, to where you can reflect on some of the beauties within it, but also the struggles, the things you've learned, the things you've gained. Where I think, and it's interesting because when I first came to Denver, like who I was, I think there were principles and values that are still the same, but I was very much so like I partied, I was like drank a ton, was very go.
Yeah.
Where now I don't really drink anymore, and I take a lot more time for self-reflection and like a lot more alone time, where I'll do runs and it's just by myself. Like, I don't want to run with anyone today. And I'll put on a podcast and I won't think about anything. I'll just be like letting my mind wander.
Yeah.
And I think that like 2.5 year hiatus that I had traveling allowed me to take a step back and think like, why am I doing the things that I'm doing?
Yeah.
Whether it be like drinking or like the work I'm doing, all of that, where it was so awesome to me that as a freelancer, I mean, and there's pros and cons to everything, but one of the coolest things would be, it could be a Tuesday. And I just go, I'm just going to sit at the pool and I'm not going to do anything. Like, I'm just going to lay here. I'm going to put on a podcast and I'm just going to burn in the sun.
Yeah.
And those times were so important for me in who I am today, of like my dad had a hard time understanding, like, you're quitting your job that pays you well, that you have health insurance through with a retirement plan, to go get paid no money to like live in a foreign country. And I'm like, that is exactly what I'm going to do.
Yes, sir.
And it's like, and then there'd be days, I mean, you work 12 hours a day, like where you're working through a video edit and you're like, I need to get this right. And like, I need to get all these things and sound effects and sound design. But then there'd be days where I'm like, I am not going to do anything but be with myself.
Yeah.
And I think that's been the biggest takeaway for me from traveling, is like, some days this whole weekend I've ran with people, like done social things, like been very outgoing. And then tonight it's like post podcast, I might put on the Nuggets game and not talk to anyone for like the next 13 hours.
Yeah.
And it's like taking that time, that like third step of like, okay, you're building anticipation for doing this thing. Now you're doing the thing. But then after doing the thing, like, you need to intermittently put in this time to like take breaks to separate from that, to be like, hey, I just want to like reflect on this, where I'm too close to the situation. I need to like step away from whatever this is.
Yeah, 100%. Do you journal?
Or
like reflect? I guess. Do you journal?
I don't journal, but I write blogs.
Okay.
And it's more, I feel like writing for me has been like an outlet, and it's manifested in a few weird ways. So like a few months ago, probably 6 or 8 months ago now, had my heart broken, and like a lot of bad shit was just happening in my life, where it was just not a very dark period for me. And during that time, like, I wrote a lot. But writing started manifesting in a few different ways. Like, there were some self-reflections. There were some things I wanted to say to certain people. There were like moments where I would write blogs. There were all these like manifestations that were weird, and one of them was poems. And I had never written poetry before. And it was the weirdest like creative outlet that I don't know why, but I was just like, this is what I have to do right now.
Yeah.
That for me, writing, and I think that initially when I first started writing it helped me, just like so much is going on in my head.
Yeah.
That I'm like, I need to just put this somewhere to get it out of my head, because 100%. I've been thinking about it too long.
Yeah.
But not necessarily specifically journaling.
Okay.
Do you journal?
Yeah.
Do you have like a daily practice, or?
No. Normally I just journal when bad shit's going down normally. And then I'll try and, it's like intermittent. Like when I was on vacation, I didn't journal at all.
Yeah.
Which is kind of surprising. Or like, I thought I brought my journal. I was like, I'm going to be journaling a lot. And then didn't pick it up.
Yeah.
Like, I was just like, I was chilling with friends and didn't do it. And I kind of use it as a combo of like a daily planner when I'm using it. It's like, all right, tomorrow is July, or what's today? June 3rd? June 4th? Yeah. So it's like tomorrow's June 5th, and I'll write down like, I need to do this, this, and this, and like make a list for myself. And then like we'll write down random thoughts throughout the day, or ideas, or like reflect on like the Moab trip we went on. Like, I wrote about that last night. And
so
like,
awesome.
Yeah. Or just like, oh, some bad shit's happening and I need to get the same thing, like get it out of your head. And I feel like it's just really, really nice for that. Like, writing in general is just like nice to be able to like put what you're thinking into, like, there's a lot of emotion, you know, that goes along with bad thoughts, at least for me. And so it's like, put that emotion into words and then put the words on the paper and like by giving those thoughts energy and physically manifesting them, it's like you said, like gets it out of my brain, and is a nice way to just like clear the mind, you know.
Well, and it's interesting you say it about the negative thing, because that's typically what happens for me too. Of like when shit's going bad, I want to write.
Yeah.
And I think so. I'm like fascinated by humans. Like I think it is so interesting. Like we have this, all of us have this individual perception of what the world is. And I think perception and perspective are different. But like perception to me is like your ability to view the world through the lens that you were given based off of your relative experiences, upbringing, like values, etc. It's almost like your filter for the world. Where perspective is more of like, to me, you have the ability to take an alternate, not necessarily perception, but look at something.
Sure.
Where perception is almost you don't have control over it because it's like your amalgamated experience until this point.
Sure.
That then you might, something drastic may happen and your perception changes.
Right.
But you don't necessarily have control over it. But I think that one of the things that comes up a ton with like biologists and neurology and all of the psychology, all the smart people stuff, is that like negative experiences are like burning an egg on a pan. That like when you go to cook and it's like the first time you've ever cooked and you have to like scrape the shit out of this pan and you're like, gosh, like you will, they equate it to like burning your hand on the stove. That like when you're a kid and you put your hand on the stove and you burn your hand, you're like, holy shit. Like back when stoves were like those old, they didn't have like it was the spiral burner.
Yeah.
And you're like,
electric coil.
as soon as it got not hot, it looked the same as when it was cold.
Yeah.
And it didn't have the indicator light where it was like, hey, this was hot at one point. And even if it did, it's not like this burner's hot.
Right.
So like you go to put your hand on and you burn your hand. And you're like, I will never forget the first time I burned my hand on this thing. Yeah. But negative experience, and it makes sense. Like you would have a negative experience and imprint it in your brain because then it would deter you from doing that behavior. Like if everyone, if you believe we were, monkeys or whatever, and we were like roaming around and Steve was like, hey, look, this thing. And everyone's like, okay, like, let's see. Steve eats the thing. And you're like, what happens? And then Steve dies. You're like, okay, that, like, don't eat it again.
Yeah.
Bad.
Yeah.
But then, like, all the good stuff.
Yeah.
Like, you, like, moved a rock from there to there to, like, build a shelter.
Yeah.
People are like, pat you on the back, like, okay,
good job. Yeah. Use a tool to crack open nut.
Yeah, like, very...
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like a non-stick pan is the way they say it. That it comes in and it goes out. And I think that journaling... I think physically journaling is really awesome. Because, like, the actual... it is really hard to write words. Like, we live in a world where it's like, I could type 10 pages in an hour. Yeah. You can't write 10 pages in an hour.
Yeah.
Like, it's very difficult to... And I think that, too, similar to, like, with Twitter... and I don't have Twitter, but you're limited in characters. So you're trying to make the most amount of bang for your buck on a tweet. Yeah. But with writing on a page, it's like kind of the same thing. At some point, your hand's going to get tired of like writing words. So you have to be very intentional with the things that you're saying in a handwritten note or a handwritten letter. And I think that that's why, like if I were to get a letter from you or like you were to get a letter from me, you're like, holy shit. Yeah. Like Henry sat down and wrote 2 pages of shit. Yeah. Like, fuck. Like I have handwritten notes from years ago that I've kept. Yeah. And it's just like, it means a lot. It's very intentional with speech. Yeah. And I think that type of stuff is so cool that to take appreciation for that. And even like you're talking about reflecting on Moab, like so fun. Like that float was so fun. And I can't wait. I want to see these pics too. Like,
oh yeah, I have them done actually. I should share them out. Is there a shared album or something?
I think so. I think there's a Moab one. Okay. If you don't have it, I'll send it to you.
Yeah. I got it edited.
But it's like
that was hilarious.
So we focus so much on the negative, or like it's an ease for us to focus on the negative that I think, and even when I was traveling, we would do this where we would take time and just be like, dude, like me and my buddy Drew, like we're sitting at this bar at this hostel in like Sri Lanka or Indonesia, and it's like I'm getting paid to take pictures of this crazy party, like in the middle of a foreign country.
Yeah.
Like, this is the coolest thing ever. Like, just to take a moment and think about that. Of even floating in the river, it's like that type of stuff where you can just take a moment to appreciate, like, this is such a cool time. Yeah. And, like, the ability to hang out with the people you love and, like...
Yeah. I can't believe this is my life.
Yeah, and it's not...
Looking at the rocks or whatever, wherever you are in that moment. Or, like, even if it's fucking driving in traffic, it's like, I can't believe this is my life.
Absolutely.
But, like, you're alive. And, like... traffic's not a good example, but
you never know when that's gonna hit though.
Yeah,
that you have these pockets of appreciation. It's like dwell on that.
Yeah,
because I think that we so often don't.
Yeah, totally. So it's like, oh, this is normal. I'm doing something fun.
Yeah, like we go to Moab every year for Memorial Day. Like we're going, and I'm like, yeah, we do, but it's different.
Yeah,
like it's not
every time, and we're all different, slightly different people, and it's like it'll never be the same. Than it is right now.
I love the quote, no man steps in the same river twice. Because he's not the same man, and it is not the same river.
Boom. I like that. Speaking of rivers, I got to take a piss.
Yes, take a piss. Sorry. No, you're good. You're good. We'll take a break. We would like to thank no sponsors of this podcast because we do not have any sponsors. Because I think like 6 people listen to this podcast. But I'm grateful for all 6 of you. Oh, I have to give Ben a shout out. Ben Carr, you're the man. I believe that one of his famous quotes is don't do, if you do something too long, be careful because you might go colorblind. I believe that was one of his. He sent me like 7 options, and I'm forgetting all of them. But one of them involved going colorblind. So, Ben, you're the man. Shout out. Also, we've been doing... This is like almost 2 hours.
Holy shit. It's going on like this.
I know. It's... I think it's interesting because it's less intimidating than people think, I feel like. That they're like, what do you talk about for 3 hours? It's like, dude, I don't have a plan.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, you kind of go wherever it needs to go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty funny. Well, because maybe, too, in life, you just don't have conversations that go deeper than, like, hey, what are you doing for work? Like, bullshit. You know, like, there's some people that are just, like, expert bullshitters that can talk about any fluffy thing and, like, be funny and forever.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's not me. But, like, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to fathom, like, a conversation that has no end or beginning or like purpose or topic, that's like, oh, I'm trying to get, like, when I go to get drinks or get coffee with somebody or like you meet someone at a bar or, it's always different. I don't know, I'm rambling.
No,
making a good point.
No, well, and that's something I was thinking about when we were talking about like reincarnation and like living multiple lives, or this is just one physical representation of many of these dimensions or levels or whatever you want to call it. I feel like, and I would say I feel this with you, and it happens sometimes where you like meet someone and it's just super easy.
Yeah.
Where it's not like forced. You're just like, hey, like every time, and I may not see that person a ton.
Yeah.
It's like every time I meet them and or have a conversation with them, I'm like this is something where I'm like, I don't know if we knew each other in a past life or whatever, but it's not forced at all.
Yeah. There's no work in it.
Yeah, it's very, it's like square peg, square hole. Yeah. It's like, I get it.
Yeah.
And it's, I was thinking about this too, and I say a bunch of weird stories to people at work, and they're like, what the hell are you talking about? And one of the things, I feel like I'm not a free spirit, but I'm free-spirited. And I was talking to someone at work about this, and I was trying to figure out, how do I say this? Like, I would say I have characteristics of free-spiritedness. Like, I love to wander. Like, I would talk to a wall. Like, I'm curious about a lot of things that, like, like it leads me to opportunities and conversations because I'm, like, have some of those characteristics. But I don't think I'm a free spirit in that, like, I've run across a few people where it's very focused on, like you meet them and you're just like, something's different about you. Where you're like, you have this almost like carefree mindset and infinitely curious mind. That the way I tried to explain it, and I'm terrible at this, but I was like, okay, it's like if you're on a hike and you like come into this field and like you're the only one on the hike and you're like, whoa, like this is so cool. Like this open field in the middle of this forest and the light's like streaking through. And then all of a sudden, like a horse appears. And you're like, that's not like the horse you ride. That's like a wild animal.
Yeah.
And you're like looking around. You're like, no one's here. Like, what is this?
Yeah.
Like, I can't believe this is happening. Like, no one's going to believe me. And all of a sudden, this horse is like, hey, like, I see you. And like meanders over. And you're just like kind of hanging out with this horse. Like, you're petting it. Like, it's like letting you interact with it. And you're just like, whoa. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it just bolts off. And you're like, no one's going to believe me.
Yeah.
Like,
Did that just happen?
Like, did this really just happen?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's how my interactions have been with, like, true free spirit people. Is, like, almost like you don't want to tame the horse. Like, you don't want to, like, take them from this thing where it's like, you have this beautiful thing.
Yeah.
That is this, like, infinite depth of curiosity and, like, genuine, just, like, pursuit of this, like, I don't even know how to explain it, where it's like, you come across the path with someone like that and you're like, I am not that, but I love that. I'm like, that is so cool. And one of the things that there was this experiment basically where they took these cats and they like cracked their brain open, ripped everything out other than basically their hypothalamus. So they're these hypothalamic cats, and they like put them in basically like a guarded thing, like not a cage, but like a, hey,
like
you can't,
closure of
yeah,
sorts?
like you can't leave this room.
Yeah.
And what happens is that basically without like a prefrontal cortex, the cat would like come up to this can and like smell the can and be like, whoa, this is a can, and then like leave and then come back to the same can and be like, whoa, what is this? Like, this is a can? Oh my gosh, I've never seen a can like this. But and literally like that, they basically didn't have a prefrontal cortex to filter to say like, hey, you've already seen this,
Right.
like you kind of know. And it's interesting because if you think about it in the perspective of like relationships or like friendships or whatever, where like maybe you've been betrayed or like hurt, and you now associate that with all these other things that now, like if you're trying to start a new relationship, you're dragging all of that into this other relationship. That like you have this filter in your brain that's telling you like, hey, don't you burn your hand on that stove. Like, don't touch that stove again. But like without a prefrontal cortex, you have this like infinitesimal amount of curiosity. And so as long as these cats were like fed and given water, they would basically live and be fine. In that you couldn't let them out of the cage.
They're not going to be able to take care of themselves.
Yeah, they can't take care of themselves, and if they were to, because they're so curious, they'd probably walk into traffic and get hit by a car.
Right.
So it's like they don't have that filter to know, like, hey, I'm a deer. I saw this thing. Last time I saw that thing, Steve died. Like, I'm going to run. Like, so, and I almost equate free-spiritedness or like free spirits to that, in that it's not necessarily that I'm saying that if you're a free spirit, you're naive, but you have this kind of almost unfiltered view of the world where it's not like this person's going to hurt me. It's just like, hey, like, what do you do? Like, why are you interested in that? Like, that type of mindset. And I think it's so cool to see because I don't think I have that, where I have some characteristics of like a wandering person, wandering soul or whatever, but it's not that I am that. And I think it's so cool to see where you have this interaction and then it's like, I don't know how long it's going to last, but Like, it was awesome while it lasted.
Yeah.
And then the horse rides off.
Yeah, you get to walk on the same path for a brief period of time. Yeah, it's cool. Like, hungry, curious minds about the world. I don't think I have that either. But it's like, you know it when you see it, of those types of people.
And you're like, you're different.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you're like, oh, there's something different about you. Like, society hasn't quite squashed the childhood curiosity that lives within all of us.
Yeah, almost like their inner child has never left.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And it's like, I feel like that's something society does, or like school does, and like you were saying earlier, like this fear of failure does, you know, like school, and or at least for me, like growing up, like there was a fear of failure. And like that's like you fail a test and there's consequences. It's not like, it's like, and now as an adult, it's totally opposite. It's like failure is okay and a good thing because it's a learning experience and it means you're trying shit. And I feel like there's like failure should be encouraged.
Yeah.
As like young people, you know, it's like you're young, you have nothing going on. Like there's no responsibilities, no real consequences if you fail. And like go do it. Go fail. And fail fast. But fail. You know, and like, and that's okay.
Well, and I think it's hard because, like, and I think we'll see a big issue with this as like younger generations get older, is that because we live in this constant technology where we're all connected but individual, like, even though what you're doing is good, or even though maybe like you performed well, you're still going to be thinking about this other person who did it better or faster or cooler, or that,
Yeah.
like, and if you did it wrong, then it's like, how do you take, or like you failed, how do you take that? Because you're constantly surrounded by people who have the appearance of success.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't envy the generation going up. I don't know, man. That's
Which, when were you born?
92.
92.
Yeah.
91.
Nice.
So you, and this is, people always talk about like, no, we were the generation on the cusp. And I think that like, if you were born in the 90s, or really probably like maybe 85 to like 95, you still fall into the bucket of like, you had to deal with like dial-up internet.
Yeah.
And like, you had a time and period where you didn't have internet.
Yeah.
And like, phones weren't, like, you had to pay per text.
Yeah.
And like, to connect to the internet was like, you had to pay for, and then it would like send a signal and you'd have to wait. And you're like, I remember having a BlackBerry and being like, oh, like, I'm about to be on the internet.
Yeah.
Like, this is wild. And like, you only got so much per month, where now everything's literally unlimited.
Yeah.
It's like, but that we got a little bit of both sides.
Yeah.
And not to say, I mean, there were generations that really got the full spectrum, but I think we really got at least a good taste of both.
Yeah. When did you get your first smartphone?
I got my first cell phone when I was 16.
Yeah. Wow.
And it was I think it was a Razor.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a smartphone.
Yeah.
I got my first like Android, I want to say, when I was like 18 or 19.
Yeah.
And then I had a BlackBerry for most of college.
Nice.
I got it was my
That's
first
hilarious.
iPhone was, I want to say, almost 24. And it was like an iPhone like 3 or like something where it was like everyone was on like iPhone 6 or 7 or 8, and I was like old model.
Oh yeah.
And I basically had, and I've always been a late adopter
Yeah.
from that standpoint. I just upgraded to a 14 because my old phone literally had no storage. Like, I had to delete text messages from
Oh,
people
no.
because I had
Yeah.
no ability to
Oh,
like,
God.
it was bad.
Yeah, that's
like,
bad.
But my first phone, I grew up relatively poor.
Yeah.
And my first phone was when I got my first job.
Oh,
So like,
nice.
got a job, was able to pay for car insurance, where me and my twin brother shared a car.
Nice.
And then and my dad bought the car, but it was a 92 Buick LeSabre,
Wow.
just a boat of a car.
Yeah.
And we shared it,
Nice.
and then we split the insurance, split the gas, and then that's when I bought my first phone.
Oh, right on.
But what about you?
I guess it was high school, like 14. Had a Razor. Same thing.
Did you have I remember doing this. I figured out, like, once you got used to like T9,
Yeah.
and you knew that the 5 was raised, I could open my phone and I could look down and see the message and then put the phone back in my pocket to reply and text it.
Yes.
Like without looking at it.
It was T9 was easy once you figured it out.
Yeah.
It's like there's only 9 buttons you can hit. So, I mean, I guess you can hit them a couple times, but yeah. Yeah, I like T9 texting. I got a smartphone in college, like, but yeah, it was like, I don't know. It's a different time. I feel like it gives growing up without, and I wasn't allowed to play video games or really like watch a ton of TV. So I feel like I missed out on a bunch of like cultural things that were like in the millennial generation of like cartoons that was like baked into culture. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah, but like there wasn't technology really besides movies and like a little bit of video games to take you out of the day-to-day life. Like, we get home, like, go play outside. Yeah. Me and my brother would just go outside and play with the neighbors and like play football or hunt around the backyard for like bugs, and like climb trees.
Do you have one brother?
One brother, one sister.
Okay.
I'm the oldest, so my brother's 28, my sister's 26.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you born and raised in Colorado?
I was born in Connecticut, and then my parents moved to Colorado when I was 2.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then lived here, like, more or less till adulthood.
Mm-hmm. And now you live in?
Now in Washington State.
Okay.
Yeah. Been there for 1.5 years.
And is it a permanent situation?
I don't know. It's permanent for at least another year.
Yeah.
At least another ski season.
Yeah.
And then, I've kind of always been the person that's just like go with the wind.
Yeah.
Whatever the opportunity is, or like right now I'm in a relationship with a dope girl, so it's like maybe I'll stay there for a bit.
Yeah.
So, and see where things play out with that. Maybe there'll be another opportunity and I move somewhere else.
Yeah.
I don't know. But this was just like a good opportunity, and I guess I've like with filming polo, we traveled a ton for work. So it's like as an adult, like leave Colorado for a couple months, come back to Colorado for a couple months, leave Colorado, come back.
Yeah.
So, but here's I guess home. Still say I'm from Colorado.
Yeah. Is your family still all here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's nice.
Do you remember when you were growing up, like significant like technology changes?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know I guess I remember like the events, like if you're like, oh, the iPhone is released or like the iPod comes out, like those kind of, like the internet for sure. I mean, I remember really using the internet in 3rd grade for the first time, like when I started playing RuneScape.
Oh, dude, you played RuneScape?
Yeah.
Dude, I was a RuneScape nerd. We used to go to the public library.
Oh, no way.
And we would log in on the computer at the public library, and you get like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And we would play RuneScape, and it'd be like you had 5 minutes. There was like a little ticker in the top, and it's like, you have 5 minutes left. And I'd be like, okay, Zach, like, you click my thing so it doesn't log me out. I'm going to go run to the desk, and I'll get us 30 more minutes.
Oh,
and we'd go and be like, we want 30 more minutes for computer 2 and 6. And she'd be like, okay. I'm like,
nice.
And we're like, oh, am I good? And like, yeah, dude, you're good. Like,
yeah, let's finish the quest.
Yeah. So wild.
Yes,
like,
dude. Oh, yeah.
And I think about, like, looking back on that, as you were saying T9, I was like, I don't know if I could do T9 right now. Like, if someone gave me an old phone, like, I don't know if I would know how to do a T9 thing.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many things that...
you just forget. Like, well, no muscle memory. Like,
even they were talking about this on a podcast recently of cursive. Like,
oh, yeah.
There's so many things I'm like, I know how to sign my signature.
Yeah.
But I'm like, there's a lot of cursive stuff that I don't know.
Yeah. How do you make a Z? For sure don't know how to do that.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Like, what was old that's, like, was so important that's now not.
Yeah, totally. Times change. I used to hate change. I would be like, fuck, things are changing. Like, I don't want this to change. It means I need to learn a new thing or, like, or, like, buy something new, or not really buy something new, but just, like, there's always something new happening. And as a kid, I never really liked it. I just liked things to stay the same.
Yeah.
And as I got older, it was like a conscious mental shift I had to make to, like, now it's like, okay, new things. Like, I like new things.
Yeah.
Because that's where the opportunity is like when something new comes out, there's new technology, there's new, like, I don't know, like, yeah, it's mainly technology, but it's just like that's where the cutting edge of like society is.
Yeah.
So like if you're gonna hate against it, that only sets you personally back, like, and waste your energy of like, fuck, things changing. Like, they're it's like you sound like a stodgy old man, like, oh, back in my day things were the best. But it's like whatever, change is inevitable.
Yeah.
So we gotta like change with the times, and like you might as well embrace change. So I've tried to learn to embrace change since becoming an adult.
Why do you think people are afraid to change? Or why do you think they're opposed to it? Is it fear?
I don't know. Maybe there's just like you get comfortable knowing like the world around you as it is, and like it changed slower before the rapid industrialization, and now it's like with like Moore's law, like changing so fast. Everything that has to do as we get more ingrained with technology, like it just changes faster.
Yeah.
And that means you have to learn something new, and like become uncomfortable, and then like there's new things make us inherently uncomfortable, I think, unless you cultivate a mindset of, oh, there's new things, I'm curious, you know. And so it's just the world's easier when nothing changes in your world.
Yeah.
You can just like coast along. I do this every day, and like nothing changes, and I don't change, and sounds boring.
Do you think? I think this is a question I wanted to ask too. Is
Yeah.
because I feel like with the creative world, like that's one big thing that happens a ton.
Yeah.
Is change, but also like almost separating yourself from your work.
Yeah.
From the standpoint of like, you may have this identity with like this type of work or this concept, and like as styles change, or if you're not allowing yourself to be dynamic, like you can become obsolete fairly quick.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, you see that for sure with film and then digital, like that huge transition. I wasn't like privy of that happening, but like with learning and watching videos or podcasts of like people who were deep in the film game, and then digital comes along and they're like, no, this new technology will never take on. I'm not going to learn this new thing. And then before you know it, 5 years go by, and it's like, if you don't know digital, like no one's hiring you.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, like you gotta. I feel like I just had a conversation about this with my managing director, because he was like, yeah, I'm leaving the company. Like the company's gone from like 6 people when I joined to now 2. Well, he's going to be on throughout the summer, but like 2 people. And he's leaving because he sees he's been in marketing for 10 years, and he's like, man, it's just like times have changed so much. Like there used to be a market for boutique film production companies that could come and make like very specific branded videos for certain clients. And now what he sees is people that are like in our competitions, like Steep does work with like tourism agencies and like outdoor lifestyle and like small brands. And small brands are going with like individual influencers and like affiliate marketing. And then the tourism places that would normally hire us are going with agencies because they do everything.
Yeah.
It's like, whereas we are stuck kind of like, well, we'll make the content for you, but then deliver it, and then you have to, as a client, have to worry about distribution and like what to do with it then. Yeah. And so, like, unless you're doing the full service or just like one tiny piece, which costs the brand nothing of like affiliate style, like the market for the in between seems to be just like shrinking. Yeah. So he was like, that's his observation, and he was like, I think I'm done. I don't want to keep fighting this fight. I'm gonna go work for the Forest Service.
Huh.
Yeah.
I feel like it's interesting because I think that being creative is not a necessarily intuitive thing. Like, from the standpoint of not all of us have the eye or and I'm not saying this from a perspective that I have this, but from the standpoint of being in a creative space, I think is really hard. And so the question I wanted to ask was, like, what does your creative process look like? And so context or background, I do some photo and video work. I do not think I'm at the level that you are. I think what you do is beautiful.
Oh, thanks.
But from the standpoint of, and did you go to school for this type of work?
So yeah, I studied it in college, at Colorado College.
CC?
Yeah. And basically that helped like maintain the interest in it, I would say, and like taught me a little bit, enough to get hired by a film production company who was in need of people after college.
Yeah.
Where then I learned like really what to do, I guess, or it's been a constant learning process, but learned more in the real world than I did in college.
Yeah.
Like
absolutely.
Learning theory, I didn't know what I was doing, and like I just wanted to get behind a camera, and my teachers it was enough to like keep you going, whatever. My process now, I'm disorganized.
I think
like, I don't know, like I guess everything that I've done in the last year, I don't really have a good process of it. It's like, okay, the client, like Crystal Mountain, I work primarily for Crystal Mountain the past year and a half. So it's like we have a scope of work with them because we're contracted by them to produce videos and marketing material. And so it's like, okay, we want to make a summer brand video. That's the video I'm editing right now. And so from them, it's like, okay, like what do you want this to look like? And they're like, okay, well, we'll write a script. So they write a script. I look at the script today or like last week, and like, the script, okay, I see what they're going for, but the script itself is like not very punchy or good.
Yeah.
Like in terms of like converting people or giving people a feeling of what it's like to be a Crystal in the summer. It's like encompasses everything that they want.
Yeah.
Like we want to touch on the beautiful lakes, the trails, the dining experience, and the views of Mount Rainier. So I'm going to take that script that they have, which is very explicitly mentioning all of those things that to me doesn't flow well when you're producing a voiceover video.
Yeah.
And like craft it into something that gives more of a feeling of what the lakes and the rivers are like, or like, yeah, gives you more feeling of like what it's going to be like to be there, and then basically take all the B-roll that have been shot over the past 3 years of summertime and like try and fit it into the puzzle piece.
Yeah.
Because we don't have budget to like go and shoot with a whole new thing with like talent that makes everything feel cohesive. So it's like putting together a puzzle of trying to be cohesive. So I guess like trying to understand the client's goals would be the first part of the process. Then conceiving of something that I think will emotionally move people to hopefully convert them into becoming a customer of Crystal Mountain, of like showing up to go, in this case, go ride the gondola, look at the epic views, enjoy the trails, enjoy the offerings that are there. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Kinda?
Well, it's interesting too, because that example, and I've had to do this before. I think it's, if you're not like soup to nuts on a project, it's really hard, at least for me, to go like, hey, here's a bunch of footage that someone else shot. I want you to like do this thing, and our goal is to convert more people to become customers.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of I'm reading his book finally, but Simon Sinek wrote a book called Start With Why.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of, and kind of what you were saying is like, the mountain has probably said like, hey, we want more customers. And it's like, so we can show them our stuff and get money and revenue to keep this place going, which makes sense. Like that's your job. Yeah. Like you're a company and you're trying to make money. Like I totally get that.
Yeah.
But what they're talking about is the what of like the end result.
Yeah.
And you're trying to figure out the how, which is like, how can I emotionally convey this or like put this into a message or a package that like connects with people and connects with why they do what they do.
Yeah.
And I think that that's like the beauty of creative, is that you look at someone who's probably very sales focused or very operationally focused. All they're focused on is the transaction, like the end goal, like revenue, widgets, whatever. But then you have to connect to, I'm sitting on my couch watching a YouTube video and I'm waiting for the 5 seconds to end so I can click skip ads.
Yeah.
Because I'm too cheap to pay for fancy YouTube. But like, what's gonna get me to stop?
Yeah.
From clicking skip ads?
Yeah.
Like, and you have 5 seconds to try to deliver this impactful. I mean, think about, like, I always make fun of it, but it's funny because it works. The ASPCA commercials, where it's Sarah McLachlan.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like, in the arms. And there's, like, sad dogs.
Yeah, dude.
And, like, it just tugs
Yeah.
on your, like, people are playing on the fact that we are emotional creatures.
Yeah.
And it's like having empathy for this situation.
Yeah.
And it's like, that was a beautiful work of marketing.
Yeah.
Like, not super high quality video, like crazy production with transitions and color grade, but it's like that type of stuff. How do you make an impactful message to ultimately deliver what, you know, the people who are like bottom line,
Yeah.
like those types of people.
Totally. There's something that you said that reminds me of another great saying. It's like, to connect with people, it's like you can't please everyone or connect with everyone, but you want to connect with people that see themselves in the video. And it's like, people like us do things like this. And so it's like you're looking to reach those people that do things like this, which is go experience the outdoors, go hike, go look at epic views, go adventure outside. And I just like that saying. It's like the Simon Sinek thing, like start with why, and then like connect with these people. It's like people, just to say, you know, like people like us do things like this. And how do you find those people and connect with those people and make sure that those people, because, you know, they're like us, like feel moved enough to go do things like this. I'm like, well, I don't know how to do it, but trying. If I feel like if it moves me emotionally, like I'm a good representative of just generally people that like to go outside.
Yeah.
And so if it can move me, then it can move other people, is kind of the way I approach things.
Which, it's interesting because I've also now had experience on the other side, kind of the non-creative side of like paid media and like ads, where you see some of these things that it's incredible the power of what can happen, where it's like, I have this really meaningful piece of content that I want to get to these types of people. And now we have ways to literally say like, hey, Google, I want these types of people.
Yeah.
And Google's like, yeah, we can do that.
Yeah.
And it's creepy. I mean, people, and it's funny because a lot of people talk about like privacy and privacy laws and all that stuff. And in reality, I mean, not to burst everyone's bubble, like no matter how many things you opt out of or stuff you like, they have your information. Like, you're going to get ads. And this is why I would tell people to embrace it, where it's like if you see an ad that's pertinent to you, click on it.
Yeah.
Because it's like now you're going to get ads that are actually relevant. And even if you don't buy anything, like I'd rather be seeing ads of trail running or trail races or like snowboarding and like backcountry touring and like travel. Like I want to see all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And not like insurance ads.
Totally.
So it's like engage with the things that you actually like, because you're going to get pitched ads no matter what. Like you cannot escape the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, unless you... I mean, I guess, I don't know. Like,
Well, you could delete the ecosystem.
You could opt out of the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Go back
But
to
are you going to do that?
Yeah. It's like that new season of Ted Lasso. People want to know. Like, it's, and we live in, and that's, like, even when Game of Thrones was a big thing, and people would be like, Game of Thrones, dude, the newest season. Like, I'm like, I don't watch Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
It's like, I've opted out of that.
Yeah.
But it's like the newest whatever. Like, things get dropped, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I want that. Like, it's very, you can't escape it, so I'd rather get the things that are actually pertinent to me.
Yeah, it gives you options too. It's like, I was looking for like a bed topper for my truck, you know? It's like, clicked on one thing, and then all of a sudden I started getting ads, and instead of like having to look for the best bed topper, it's like 5 different companies are marketing to me.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, buy our product. And it's like, oh, I didn't know this thing existed.
Yep.
You know, before. But I don't know. Yeah, you can't. It's like, well, yeah, like you said, I'd rather see bed topper ads to something that I'm like actively pursuing than insurance.
Well, and it goes back to the change thing. It's like, you have to embrace what life gives you.
Yeah.
And like, to fight it, I mean, this makes you think of like Aya and all these other experiences. It's like you can only fight things for so long, and at some point you have to like embrace what's going on or accept that this is happening.
Okay.
Like it's okay to.
With that in mind, with your heartbreak, like, do you feel? We don't have to talk about it if you don't want to.
No.
But like, have you reached the point of like embracing and accepting what occurred? Also, I'm curious what did happen, but we don't have to talk about it.
I'd say details we don't have to go deep into. Yeah. We can do that off camera, but I would say it's something that I'm still working through.
Yeah.
Like,
was this with a romantic partner?
Yes. Okay. And it was pretty kind of out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And for me, I would say, like, and there were extenuating circumstances. There was a lot going on at the time. So it wasn't just one singular thing, but it, like, pretty well shattered like that along with everything else that was happening. Yeah. It's been probably, like, 8 months, and I would say that it's gotten better. Like, I used to not be able to talk about it.
Yeah.
And therapy has helped a bit.
Yeah.
But more so from the standpoint of, like, I don't know that time heals all wounds, but I think that, initially it's a cut, and then a cut becomes a scab, and a scab becomes a scar.
Yeah.
And, like, I'm in the process of that.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say I'm over it.
Yeah.
Like, I still cry fairly regularly about it. And it's not all the time, but, like, certain things will trigger it.
Yeah.
But for me, it's something that I'm just trying to work through.
Yeah.
And, like, it's hard to deal with. Because I think, and it comes back for me to, like, perception. And, like, I thought I had this understanding of the world and what was going on in the world. And when certain things happen, and there was a lot that was going on, that it wasn't just this one thing. It really brings into question, like, your understanding and perception of how the world works.
Yeah.
And, like, you lose a lot of faith in a lot of things.
Yeah.
And, like, not that I'm, like, now pessimistic, but I'm very guarded. And I've had a few people tell me that. And I would say I'm a fairly open person.
Yeah, I'd say so.
But from the standpoint of, I think there's certain things that I don't. Like, I would talk about almost anything that I've worked through.
Yeah.
Or, like, have had enough time to work through.
Yeah.
But there's other things where I'm like, as soon as you start to crack into emotions, it's like, that's, like, hard for me.
Yeah.
Because, I think that ultimately it comes back to fear of vulnerability. And I think that everyone has that fear.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like, you have to be vulnerable at some point, and it's all a risk. Like, you have no idea if someone's going to pull the rug out from underneath you.
Yeah.
And, like, sometimes you open yourself up and, like, it ends in a terrible way.
Yeah. Totally.
And, like, for me, it was a lot of poor timing.
Yeah.
Like, there was a lot of stuff that
it was, like, compounding. It was like there's shit on one hand going on in your life.
Yeah.
And then your romantic partner, like, up and left.
Yeah. And it was very it's interesting now looking back on it. I had a friend who, she showed me this video, and it's this series by Cannondale, and it was one of those things where we were, like, sitting on the couch, and it's, like, maybe 12 minutes worth of videos. It's 4 videos. It's, like, a 2, a 3, like, another 3, and then the last one's 6 minutes. And I remember, like, she had put it on, and we were watching it, and I was like, 2 minute video. Like, come on. Like, what are you going to do in 2 minutes?
Yeah.
And about 30 seconds in, I remember kind of being like, oh, like, we were kind of talking, and then, like, slowly, like, things started to, like, get quieter. And then the second video played. And, like, maybe a couple words were said, and then the third video played, and it was quiet. And the fourth video played, and it was quiet. And I, like, cried. And I just remember thinking, I was like, I've never had literally a 6-minute video impact me this way. But one of the things that was said, and I'm saying this because I've worked through it enough to where now I feel comfortable saying this, but I've never wanted to like kill myself or like I've never had suicidal thoughts. But in that moment, there was about a period of like 2 months surrounding all of this that, and the way this guy said it, he's a musician who rides bikes, and Cannondale was like doing a sponsored thing with him and like walking through this journey that he had. Mm-hmm. And like, for me, it wasn't that I wanted my life to end. And this is kind of the way he said it. It was like, I just wanted the pain to stop.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, I've never felt that before. Yeah. And it was like, when is this going to be normal? Mm. Like, when am I going to be who I was? Yeah. And it's like, you'll never be that person. You know, no man steps in the same river twice. Yeah. But it's like, that's probably the darkest place I've ever been. Mm. And it's like this series of compounded events that happened that like led me down this path where I was like, I don't know who I am. Yeah. Like, I don't know what to believe. Mm. Like, and just, I spent a lot of time alone. Yeah. And like, it was pretty dark. Yeah. But luckily on the other side of that, and I mean, again, still not, I have a lot of tough weeks and days, and you know, you never know when it's going to hit you or when you're going to be running on North Table and start crying when some guy sings a song about his dad. Like, you just don't know what that is or what's going to trigger that. And I don't know if that's what therapy is supposed to do, is like help you deal with things like that. But yeah, it was, and what's weird is the situation, you know, we weren't even dating.
Really? And
it was like a very intense, like 3-month thing. Yeah. That just ended really poorly and ended like with bad timing. Mm. And it like struck me to my core. Damn. Like, yeah. And I would say I'm a fairly intense person. I mean, I don't know if that comes across that way, but from the standpoint of like we were talking about initially, I'm not just like, the Broncos this year are getting a round 7 pick. Like, like I'd like to think that I'm a bit deeper than that, and that I would say so. It's fairly, I mean, I don't know if it's uncommon, but that typically leads me to having intense relationships with people. Yeah. Where it's like, you know, it's not, for me, it's not just a
fling.
Yeah.
You're putting your heart and soul into this.
Yeah, like I kind of went all in. I was like, oh, this is something you go all in on. Yeah. And it was very...
You open your heart.
Yeah, and very, I would like to think, atypical. Mm-hmm. Like, the conversations that I'm having with people are probably not something that everyone has every day. Yeah. And for me, that builds a bond between people. Yeah. To say, like, hey, you know, like, we may have only known each other for a few months or whatever, or only, you know, maybe you've known me for 5 years and we've had 5 interactions, but I'm like, maybe some of those interactions were really intense. Yeah. And it's not like we had, it was funny, we were talking about this after the float trip. Shout out Ann and Kylie. Afterwards, they're like, we really like this version of you. Like, not that the old version was bad or anything, but it's like every time we leave having a conversation, like, we ended up talking to you for like 3 hours or what, and we were talking about this stuff that's like, that's beyond just like making, you know, and all that's fun. Like, I do all the, I feel like I'm a very guy's guy. Yeah. But it's like, that has led me to like have more intense relationships and bonds with people. And I think that that's one of the things where when I had saw what was going on, I was like, okay, I've been here before. Because I've actually had it happen once before this, where it was another thing with another girl in college. Mm. And it took me like 7 years to get over it. Yeah. And it's like, I think I'm a lot more emotionally mature now, where it's like the ability to deal with it. And back then I was partying and like wasn't actually dealing with the things. But like, it's a very human experience too, that I think we all go through at some point. Yeah. And it's not to say that I'm not going to get hurt again. But it's like, like it's definitely made me jaded.
Yeah.
And like I have times still where it gets bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very I don't know, it makes you question a lot.
Do you think that this was one of the darkest times in your life? Like toughest things you've gone through?
I would say yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've run a handful of ultras now, and like
Yeah.
I've done some pretty difficult. Like I was a wrestler in college, and there'd be times where, you know, I would cut 20 pounds in a week.
Yeah.
And you're like sitting on a bed in a hotel room at like 3 a.m. on a Friday,
Yeah.
waiting to weigh in at like 6 a.m. the next day,
Yeah.
and you can't fall asleep because your body's like, dude,
Dying.
like we need food.
Yeah.
Like I've been very physically vulnerable,
Yeah.
I would say a lot,
Yeah.
but like emotionally vulnerable,
Yeah.
I've been a handful of times,
Yeah.
where it was like questioning my existence and like the world around me.
Yeah. A way to come through.
Yeah.
That definitely makes you a stronger person. Like after you go through, you're like, oh, okay, I can handle some shit. Like, I just went through some dark ass shit and like come out the other side a different person.
Yeah. It's very
It gives you that like you must have some self knowledge of like I'm resilient.
well, and I think too that the hardest part for me is like returning to normal of like, hey, not everyone is like this.
Yeah.
And or like it's not always going to be like this.
Yeah. How can I open my heart to somebody else?
Well, and I think too that coming back to the yin and yang thing, like I was raised religious, and like I'm not really that religious anymore, but I feel like so much of like Eastern religion and kind of like really all religions have different aspects that kind of form this idea of like up and down, order and chaos, yin and yang.
Yeah.
And I think that you truly can appreciate high highs without knowing low lows.
Totally.
And I think that like my eternal optimist perspective is like I went through that, and like I'm still going through this thing because ultimately one day I'm going to understand and know this other thing.
Yeah.
Which is like such a high.
Yeah.
Because there were also really high highs with this person in that
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
But like there are also really low lows, and like it's hard to dissociate now, like having run-ins with this person and not thinking like pain, like just feeling bad.
Yeah.
And like coming back to the inadequacies of like I'm like a 9-year-old kid thinking like I'm not good enough.
Yeah. It's
Like
my
I need,
fault.
yeah, it's my like I need to do more.
Yeah.
Like I'm not good enough for whatever XYZ.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and I think again too, like everything happens for a reason. It's
Yeah.
like it's hard to see it when you're close to it, and I don't know what that answer is, but like for me, ultimately, it's like that's a part of life.
Yeah.
And like sometimes shit happens, so it's like, what are you gonna do about it?
Yeah.
Like you can't change it. Like you can't like go back and make the person fall in love with you or
change your behavior that you did. Like, no, it just happened. And like, and then going forward, it takes a long time to like heal from that.
Yeah.
And feel ready to open your heart to somebody new. 'Cause, like speaking from experience, I guess like a couple of years ago, it was 2020, but like it's kind of same thing. Like had my heart broken, and like Mackie died, so it's like all within like a couple week period.
And Maggie's your dog.
Mackie. Sorry, Mackie was my best friend.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. He was my dog.
That's hey DAWG. That's what I'm talking about.
That's right.
Shout out Mackie.
Yeah, he was a dog. But it's kind of a similar thing. It's like holy fucking shit. Like I was with this girl I thought was a soulmate.
Yeah.
And then like Mackie passed away, and then like I leaned on this girl for a lot of support, and then she was like, actually, like, it's like we need a break, but I like you. Let's come back and try some shit, try things in like a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And then like comes back, it's like I'm seeing someone else. It's like, oh damn, like this is my boy, and then this girl is like ripped my heart out.
Yeah.
You know, it's like fuck. It's like such a dark place.
Yeah.
And it took like 2 years to work through that and like be ready to open my heart to somebody new.
Yeah.
And, like even feel ready, like open my heart and tell myself like, well, because I never wanted to open my heart to anybody or like be vulnerable with anybody else because I'm like, I don't want to feel like that, you know, like that girl just like I thought was a soulmate kind of had my heart ripped out, which wasn't her fault. Like honestly, I'll take like the 50% of the like I allowed myself to like be delusioned by love in a way, like, and like honestly it wasn't love, it was like I allowed myself to be delusioned by like what I thought this relationship could be, not what it actually was. And so it's like I'm also like I'm to blame for my own feelings, but at the end of the day it's like, am I going to live my life closed off from people, not allowing myself to love again because I'm scared that my heart will be ripped out? And that was like the most painful thing that my heart had been through. Or like, do I open my heart with the idea that like getting hurt is a risk, but love is worth taking that risk? And like, it's like live without love or live in love, but like knowing that living in love and like allowing your heart to be a part of somebody else is inherently like you could get hurt. I was like, well, guess I'll try again, you know, like I don't know, I'd rather live in love with the risk of like bad shit happens, I know I can come through with this. At the end of the day it'll be painful, but like I'm a resilient person, versus like I'll just live closed off and like keep my heart in a box. Damn, no, I can't do that,
dude. No, and that's
too important.
That's such a beautiful thing.
But
like
took 2 years.
Which and I think that time is such a relative thing. Like you don't know when. It's similar to, and it's interesting you say love, because Simon Sinek, or I don't even know how to say his name, Sinek.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, but
says it in the way of like if I told you, like, Henry, I just told you the story about how this girl, and you know I'm not emotionally, but tomorrow I'm going on a date.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, good for you, you ugly son of a bitch. I'm like, thank you. And I go and I come back, I'm like, dude, this is the girl. And you're like, that's awesome. Like, when are you gonna see her again? I'm like, tomorrow. We're actually we're gonna go to Vegas. We're gonna get married. You're gonna be like,
sign a prenup.
Like, pump the brakes, Matt. Like, what are you doing, man?
Yeah.
Like, you can't.
Yeah.
But if, you know, I had been with someone for 6 years, and like we go on this float trip, and you're like, oh, who's this? You're like, oh, this is my friend Amber.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, do you guys? I'm like, oh yeah, she lives at my house.
Yeah.
And Amber, like, I leave, and then Amber's like, no, like, we're dating. Like, we've lived together for like 3 years. Like, I'm like, yeah, no, my friend Amber.
Yeah.
You'd be like, hey man, it's time to shit or get off the pot. Like, this is your girl. Like,
yeah,
you're like halfway to being
label something.
Yeah, like, but somewhere between one date and 6 years, you have this mutual understanding of like love, respect, you know, acknowledgement of that this is now my person.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't really believe in like there's one person out there. I think that's the dumbest thing ever.
Yeah.
But like that in this circumstance, in this thing, like, this is your person.
Yeah.
And I think that we don't know when it is. Could be a month. It could be a year. Like, but at some point, some switch flips where you're just like, oh, like, I love this person.
Yeah.
Like, there's not like a, like, okay, you need to go on 3 dates. Like,
Yeah.
we need to, I need to meet this amount of their family.
Yeah.
Like, and then now I can say I
need
love
to
you.
check some boxes.
Yeah, it's very, and it's so arbitrary.
Yeah.
I mean, the first girl I told that I loved was my girlfriend in college.
Yeah.
And it took me a year and a half, and I was fairly intoxicated.
Oh.
And the entire wrestling team was like egging me on. Just like, dude. They're like this. Do you want to be with her? I'm like, yeah. They're like, do you think about other girls? I'm like, no, not really. Like, well, you love her. Like, go
Yeah.
tell her you love her. And
Yeah.
we've been drinking, and
Yeah.
I like walked up and I'm just like, oh, I just want to say, like, I'm like a 21-year-old
Yeah.
goon.
Yeah.
Just this super vulnerable, not comfortable with my emotions or who I am type
Yeah.
of situation.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it's like what you said of like, if you want something, like you should give that out to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And like you put that energy out and like it'll find you.
Yeah.
And after that breakup, I met a girl who ended up breaking my heart that I realized later, like 3 years later, I was like, oh, I was in love with that person.
Yeah.
And I only knew them for 3 months.
Yeah.
And it's like, what took me such a long time to reflect on was like, how did it happen so quickly?
Yeah.
Like, what were the things that made me go, this person I'm in love with, that then when I got basically rejected by them,
Yeah.
that it hurt me so bad.
Yeah.
And kind of the same thing. I mean, I would say that I was probably in love with that person.
Totally.
That like, it was fairly short,
Yeah.
but it was very intense. And I'm the type of person who somewhat wears his heart on his sleeves. So
Yeah.
it was like, I was still, and I still am, like recovering from some of that.
Yeah.
But for me, it's just more of an intense thing. Like I go all in.
Yeah.
And that's who I am.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's any like right or wrong there.
Yeah.
That's just who you are, and like that's okay. And it's hard to like take rejection because it feels, especially in relationships, it's like all personal.
Yeah.
It's like, fuck, this person is rejecting me. And then additionally, like, especially if you have a connection where you feel like you click with this person, and like they understand you understand them. There's a lot of values that interlie, and you're like, why? Like, this feels so wrong.
Yeah.
And shit, there was another point that entered my brain and then left that felt important. But yeah, I mean, it'll come back to me. But fuck, dude, it's along with that is a healthy dose of like endorphins and hormones and chemicals.
Yeah.
That are like giving you all the signals of like, be with this person.
Yeah, this is right.
Like, yeah, you're like, oh, dopamine, it feels so fucking good when I'm with them.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
give me some more of that shit. And
Yeah.
then, like, it's cut off, and you're like, not only do I feel rejected, now I'm going through withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah.
Of feel-good chemicals.
Absolutely.
Like, it feels like I'm gonna fucking die, and
Yeah.
my heart is pulverized.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, fuck. Like, but I don't know. It's just all a learning experience. Like, you learn about yourself, how you react to really tough circumstances, and you're like, fuck, I don't want this pain anymore. I think I might kill yourself. But then you didn't kill yourself, which is beautiful. And like, you're through it and still recovering from like this attempt, this very pure attempt at like one of the most pure things on earth, which is like loving somebody else.
Unconditionally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, that's so pure and so admirable. And I'm so sorry that like that person let you down in such a way that it felt like they rejected you, that advancement of like pure energy and love, in such a way that like made you feel so shitty. Cause that's just like also kind of rude, it's like,
well, it's all part of it.
Yeah.
That's ultimately, it's like, and it sucks when you're going through it.
Yeah.
But it's like, look at where you're at now. It's like the girl, she's awesome, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that you've met and like now are building a relationship and a life with, like, you wouldn't have found that person if it wasn't for all those other things.
100%. Yeah. And I wouldn't feel as equipped to like have empathy and like I'm definitely a better person basically because of what happened.
Yeah.
And like more resilient, but also just a more empathetic person.
Absolutely.
Like, who understands, like, I understand myself now better, and I understand like humans and emotions and love better because of what happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it wasn't like a quick turnaround. That's for sure. And
Yeah.
I probably broke some hearts along the way too.
Yeah.
It's like because my heart wasn't open to other people.
Absolutely.
It's closed off and sheltering.
I completely understand that.
Yeah.
That's
So.
we're almost at 3 hours. I want to say
I'm getting hungry.
and I think it's I say we wrap this puppy up.
Yeah.
This is a quote or like a thing I've been pondering a lot of. Life doesn't have a user manual. And I think that I wrote an article about it, and it made me think a lot about, like, so often in life we get told how to navigate and do all these things, whether it be taxes or finding a job or all this stuff. But then there's so much in life that we don't have an understanding for because it's so individual to you.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, understanding that is also understanding the beauty of life, because it's like no one else is living the life that you're living right now.
Amen. Yeah.
And so to take appreciation and understanding that even though, all this shitty stuff happens, like, there's also all this other freaking awesome stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, dude. Well said. I'm going to plug something. If
Yeah,
you've
plug
made
it.
this far. That's something I think you'd like is this podcast called Founders Podcast. Have you heard of this?
Yes, I have.
Dude, yeah. There's just, like, a lot of, you love quotes, and this dude, like, he basically reads biographies of, like, successful entrepreneurs or athletes or artists and musicians, and then, like, distills down what makes them tick. And it's, like, mostly historical figures that are dead. But you were just, like, throwing out, like, Socrates quotes, Aristotle quotes, and, like, he covers all these people, and I think you'd like it.
Yeah, I'll have to. I think we might have talked about it in Moab. That's maybe where.
That's where we talked about it.
I was like,
Yeah.
and that's I'm such a, especially when you're just doing stuff. Podcasts are so great.
Yeah, they're so good.
But if you want to plug any social media, there's like 6 people that listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
So, where can people find you? Because you're creating some awesome stuff, man.
Oh,
really,
thanks.
truly.
Shit. Well, I guess I'm on Instajam sometimes.
IGs.
IG, because I
You
feel
took
like
a little
it's-
break.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
a 3-week break while I was on vacay.
That's awesome.
Yeah, fuck Instagram. I have a problem. Like, I just can't control my own behavior. Even if I set limits, I just, like, instinctively go back and fucking doom scroll. It's terrible.
Yeah.
But I feel like I have to be on it to, like, post work.
Yeah.
So Instagram at hendog22, 2 N's, 2 G's. And then in the hiatus, I started a YouTube channel.
Ooh.
that I'm more interested in because it's anonymous. It's, like, not really attached to me.
Yeah.
But I'm calling it Magic Hour Ride Club.
Okay.
And I've just been, like, posting short videos and clips from skiing and, like, ideally the things I like. So it's, like, ski, bike, surf. And then, I don't know, I'm not really sure where to take it, but if you want to see some skiing clips, like, that's where that's posted.
Hell yeah.
Or you can email me if you want to get deep at henry.halle22@gmail.
That's, imagine, like, huge, like, you can't say that on, like, Joe Rogan, because then, like, 20,000 people email
No
you.
one wants to email me.
No one wants to email me.
Yeah. Amen, bro.
Hey.
Yeah. And my name's spelled with an I. Henri. Halle.
Hey, we'll appreciate guest number 5.
Guess number 5. Lucky number 5. I like
Hey,
it.
when you're
This is
back,
fun.
I know, super fun. I
Yeah.
appreciate you, man.
Dude, you too. You have deep thoughts. That's crazy.
You're an awesome human.
Shit.
I'm
Oh, shit.
glad our paths have crossed.
Me too. You're a good person.
And
You're a good person. You have a good heart.
when you're back, we'll do it again.
Yeah, I'm down.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, we'll
Hell
keep
yeah.
it going.
Awesome.
Sick.
Appreciate you, brother.
Love you.
Love you too.
Namaste.
Namaste. Love it.